I mean, you guys have already seen the one time, you know I'm gonna need all the help I can get. On January 25th, 2024, the last downloadable music tracks for the long-running rhythm game platform Rock Band Fall were released. The final 3 tracks curated together form the bittersweet themes of farewell and appreciation, marking the end of new weekly DLC content for the title after 9 years. These songs are the last of 1,095 songs added since the game's launch on October 6, 2015, 834 of which are unique to Rock Band Fall, and 261 were relicenses of export tracks from older games. While not quite sunsetting Rock Band Fall entirely, as new Rivals challenges will continue to be supported for at least a little while longer, this still bookends the active development of Rock Band as a franchise itself, at least for now. A game series that spanned 3 console generations with cross-DLC support between 7 entries with transferable music imports to the latest mainline games for over 16 years. While these content drops were comparatively modest to the typical AAA service game, Studio Harmonix Music Systems provided an astounding level of post-launch support in the space, all while pulling double duty as both developer and self-publisher of all their titles after 2011. The staff supporting the game with new songs in their charts, updating backwards compatibility of exported songs to the latest game systems and features, 36 seasons worth of weekly Rivals challenges, associated art assets for the UI and player cosmetic rewards in the workshop, continued community presence, back-end Xbox and PlayStation Store issue resolution, music label licensing and relicensing, and general maintenance of the game and its servers deserve massive kudos for the tremendous work that was put into doing so for this long. Rock Band Fall in its final state is a terrific game that deserves more love, though the last few years haven't quite allowed widespread appreciation for it, and likely contributed to their acquisition by Epic Games in 2021. This past December, Harmonix publicly stated they are now fully committed to the active development of Fortnite Festival, a game type within the Fortnite platform that, at a casual glance, has the same highway-based rhythm framework and gameplay loop as Rock Band's, but built for default gamepads and not instrument peripherals. Festival is being posited as the studio's flagship project for the foreseeable future, which is being interpreted by some gaming press outlets, and generally the members of the Rock Band community on Reddit, as being a replacement of the series to varying degrees of hype or disdain. However, there's something to the initial discourse I've seen about Festival, an assumption that in its current form it will simply replace Rock Band. Something easy to presume at a quick glance, though it bugs me as a longtime player. Opinions are subjective, sure, but it strikes me as hollow to compare the two without the full picture of where both the studio and their platform's ecosystem was and is now, as well as the scope of the festival project, how it differs and what room there is for expansion there compared to the scale of a standard Rock Band entry. The disparate gameplay experiences between them outside of the surface level highway comparisons are also notable, but I acknowledge that having followed Harmonix since they were packing the Gibson Explorer with Guitar Hero 2, that I have a context that non-players or new players coming into the genre through Festival likely don't have. So, if I were to try to impart my, now late, take on Festival and my anxiety over its future to someone uninitiated, I would need to provide as close to the same context and history as I have to them, in a manner as close to concise and accessible as a drunk that loves buying niche expensive plastic can, chronicling the development timeline of Rock Band Fall from public inception to now in 2024. I will be somewhat critical over the course of relaying this history as a result, but I also do not shy away from celebrating the many successes either. Overall, please consider this a love letter to Rock Band Fall, fully documenting its highs and lows in all facets of its development before details start to get even further lost to time than they already have. A plea for players to continue supporting it and rhythm game platforms like it as publicly as they can in the face of its eventual end of service, and as a testament to the past and current members of the team that, throughout the years, have put their all into letting players rock the world. Very briefly before we focus on Fall, I need to go over the scope of the earlier Rock Band games, as the goals and highlighted features of each prior main entry will be important context for some of my later analysis. There's a lot I'm omitting for brevity that I can and will ramble about if prompted, so please know I'm cutting down to just the essentials to juxtapose with Rock Band Fall. Rock Band 1 in 2007 took the Guitar Hero formula Harmonix made for Activision and expanded it to a full band instrument suite. With the tagline "Start a Band, Rock the World," they emphasized a degree of rock fantasy wish fulfillment. The peripherals had been built to be somewhat immersive, in some obvious ways, like the drums requiring the physicality and timing as one would need on a real kit, to smaller details, like the pickup switch on the Fender Strat guitar controller determining one of 4 different sound filter types held notes would make. Customizable avatars and instruments in the cosmetic-based rock shop allowed players to express themselves with clothing and instrument options to build an image unique to their experience or even their own image. Their DLC framework of weekly song ads became part of the series' identity moving forward as well, with an emphasis on retaining backwards compatibility being consistent throughout the mainline series. Rock Band 2's goals upon its 2008 release appeared to be a refinement of the previous iteration, building more of its own identity away from Guitar Hero's structure with a more fleshed out and unique online total story mode, added quality of life updates to their existing gameplay loop, and in the emphasis on community such as with the multiplayer game mode Battle of the Bands. This game type consisted of weekly challenges for bands to play a curated themed setlist, competing with other bands for the highest score and in turn the highest place on the online global leaderboard. At the end of its life cycle, they established the Rock Band network as a DLC ecosystem, mostly within the Xbox SKU, for artist-created charts that can be sold with a profit split. While peripheral accessories were made, like the official symbol expansion, and third parties made compatible double bass add-ons and at least one MIDI kit for use in Rock Band, the standard launch tracks in 2 did not differentiate or accommodate unique charts for these in its gameplay, and these immersion elements were less emphasized as a result. Rock Band 3 in 2010 appeared to show Harmonix seeing these immersive third-party accessories as the community wanting a more technical experience overall. They added keys as a new instrument type, which was played with a new keytar peripheral. They re-implemented double and triple vocal harmony tracks, a feature from the Beatles' Rock Band, which allowed multiple singers to sing at once with up to 3 different USB or compatible wireless headset mics. They also added pro instrument charts for a more technical challenge, ranging from pro drums having unique cymbal notes for optional cymbal accessories, to pro guitar converting real guitar tablature to the note highway, using either a real compatible Fender Squire model made for the game, or this monstrosity, to pro keys that utilize the full range of 25 keys on the keytar controller as opposed to the default charts using 5. Structurally, the game's toll story mode and online quick play had no significant changes, outside the addition of animated cutscene transitions. However, the multiplayer options would see the quiet removal of the competitive skull duel and tug of war modes. Again, quality of life improvements were made and the rock shop was expanded a bit, but they didn't try to fix anything that wasn't broken and focused on adding onto the instrument peripheral suite and pro mode charting enhancements for many, but not all, songs previously released and to be released for Rock Band 3. While Pro Drums was a seemingly welcome addition with its continued presence in the next entry, the onboarding for all instruments in full for all game options available in this entry will likely consider too prohibitively expensive, obtuse, or niche for the majority of players to carry forward. So with all this established, we will jump 5 years after the launch of Rock Band 3, where our story begins. On January 12, 2015, Harmonix announces 3 new tracks as Rock Band 3 DLC coming the next day: Arctic Monkeys' Are You Mine, Avenged Sevenfold's Shepherd of Fire, and Foo Fighters' Something from Nothing. This is notable as 2 years prior, on April 2, 2013, Harmonix released Don McLean's American Pie, announced as the final DLC track and the end of support for Rock Band 3. This was during their pre-PAX East Rock Band Night event, with the rationale being to focus support on new titles they had in the works. Yes, 2024 will not be the first year Rock Band DLC support has specifically ended in favor of other projects. There was no break in DLC between Rock Band 1 and 2, and no telling if and when DLC would be made again. There was also a prevailing idea that the fad of instrument controllers was long over way before Rock Band 3 released, due to the oversaturation of Activision's Guitar Hero titles by 2010, which is its own separate rabbit hole. The same week, on January 15th, Harmonix sends out a survey in their newsletters and socials asking players for metric data. starting out with where they found the Solvay, general location, how many of the games they played regularly, which entry of the series was their favorite, how many DLC songs they owned, peripherals they currently had, etc. The final page, however, asked users to rank features they would consider essential for a quote, new Rock Band experience. GameSpot, in their write-up on the survey, preserved what a number of the options were, all of which are features from the previous iterations from the series. When Harmonix was asked for comment by article author Eddie McCouche, that's how I'm gonna say it, the unspecified representative, though likely then PR and communications lead Nick Chester, stated the following. From time to time, it's important for us to reach out directly to our audience to see what they're most interested in and excited about. As we've said in the past, this is a series that is near and dear to us as a studio. We're always thinking about it, as well as actively supporting the community. What the plans for the future all remain to be seen, but feedback from our fans is always valuable. We appreciate folks taking time out to let us know what they're thinking. Alex Rogopoulos, then Harmonix CEO and co-founder, among a number of other hats going into and following Rock Band Fall, was quoted in April 2014 during that year's PAX East, stating the game was not in development, but had grand plans for the 8th generation consoles for Rock Band and Dance Central. Also during PAX, then Director of Publishing and PR John Drake had stated, "No, we are not making Rock Band Fall. It is not in development. It is not actively being produced in the studio. We have thoughts about what it could be and would love to put it out." While not definitively official, these quotes in April 2014 and the release of the survey in January 2015 lead me to speculate that pre-production had started not too long before or after it was downplayed at PAX East and was on the cusp of full production when the survey went out in January 2015. Back to the survey itself, it appealed less as what cool new things should we add, and more asking what the team developing the next entry should prioritize from the previous entry's core features for its launch. To my knowledge, an infographic outlining what features were most requested was never released publicly by Harmonix, but it wouldn't take long before they would give a tiny glimpse at how they would use the results. It's now March 5th, 2015. Harmonix's official YouTube channel and a newly minted Rock Band channel releases a mini documentary titled Rock Band Fall, Behind the Scenes with Harmonix. The video consists of a number of developer interviews, mostly emphasizing the team's excitement to work on a new Rock Band for the first time as an indie outfit. They speak on some of the feedback gathered from the January survey,
who owns all the DLC and what consoles do they have?
The heightened risks and anxiety of self-publishing this entry without the backing from Viacom and MTV games they had previously.
In the past we've had bigger teams and sort of the corporate overlords and a lot of different masters that we had to serve.
Video game industry is tough as hell.
You know, the stakes are really high for this studio.
They're even somewhat transparent that some of their innovations in the past might not have been the right call, placing visual emphasis on the cool Z Corporation Rock Band 2 custom bandmade figures rather than some other decisions. Man, I hate this thing. There are teases of only UI and character model animations, but the video closes out with an open release window within the year. Even without any footage, there was an immense eruption of hype in the comments for the series to return. Some griping about the platforms it wasn't announced for, and presumably light ribbing with how many times you'll hear Wrestle with Jimmy aside, the comments are stuffed to the brim with unbridled excitement. With how big an emphasis the team makes about the risk of the project, I can imagine this response was gratifying and reassuring for the team to see how amped up people were getting. In the associated Harmonix blog for the announcement, they confirm a co-partnership with then major third-party controller manufacturer Mad Catz. They state they have been developing a new range of instrument peripherals for the game, all of which will be ready for release at the unspecified launch. Mad Catz's own blog confirms 2 packages of the game that will include their controllers. The series standard full band-in-a-box bundle with the wireless guitar, drums, and a wired USB microphone, and a guitar controller bundle, including the latest iteration of the wireless Fender Stratocaster guitar. This new model had been partially shown off with the mock-up shown previous, as well as a penny arcade-themed Gabe guitar as a PAX East pre-order incentive. Shoutouts to timeless celebrity gaming icon Gabe.
Welcome to
Gabe.
Who's
Gabe?
I don't know. He's
Gabe. They also hype up improvements to the instruments with very little in the way of specifics, outside of motion sensitivity improvements and the quality of the build itself. The next day, IGN's Ryan McCaffrey posts a phone interview with aforementioned co-founder Alex Rogopoulos, with some more behind the scenes tidbits regarding the game's development. These give us the closest insights into the project's scope and goals out of all Harmonix's promotion at the time. One of which explained the full stop break between 3 and 4. Alex emphasized, like the announcement video had, that this game was to be a significant gamble for them, but elaborated a bit further. Harmonix bided their time carefully, waiting to identify a peak number of next-gen console owners to maximize the install base at the launch. We've been waiting until the new generation of consoles, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, reached a critical mass for it to make sense for us to bring the franchise back. Another interesting bit was confirmation they were calling other distribution partners this early in development, while under active partnership with Mad Catz for the main instruments. We actually are in ongoing discussions with a couple of larger distributors about potential partnerships of various sorts. It's not specified if he means the branding sponsorships with instrument and amplifier manufacturers that made their way into the game, or if he's referring to separate instrument peripheral manufacturers, or even just other game accessory companies for other dongles or adapters. It could be any or all of these things combined, but in hindsight it adds some mystery to partnerships, or lack thereof, to be detailed further in the development timeline. Ryan asks why Pro Guitar was being dropped, to which, based on my research at least, this was first publicly revealed in this statement, and gently mused if it was due to Ubisoft's Rocksmith eating their lunch as the primary real guitar game. Alex fairly candidly affirms the sentiment, as well as talked about a minor rut they felt they were in with the franchise. Rocksmith is solving the audience that wants actual guitar instrumental instruction very well. I also think that in retrospect, Rock Band had become very sprawling. It was trying to be everything to everyone in a way that was somewhat defocusing. Philosophically in Rock Band 4, we're trying to go back to the core of what made Rock Band, and just go much deeper on that as opposed to adding all this extra functionality around the edges. This is the least vague description for the scope of the game during their pre-launch marketing blitz, which never really gets detailed beyond this and is more informed by the features that were added once they were made public. It's a return to what made Rock Band, he says, without defining Rock Band and what elements of the game or specific features make up that experience. But now you know what Rock Band is from the previous section, and you will remember what Rock Band is later when we get into Fortnite Festival's launch. So keep it in your pocket for now. Going back to the interview, Alex is later asked what the scale of the team and budget size was for the game, to which he doesn't give anything concrete, but offers a comparison. It's probably not as big a production as Beatles' Rock Band, and the budget that we've allocated for the title supports a top-tier soundtrack. While there are no public numbers from the Beatles' Rock Band, it isn't a surprise considering the involvement of Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, the external Apple Corp consultants, and Abbey Road studio staff consultants brought on for the production, which likely ballooned the game's budget far more than any other title. However, then and current Harmonix project director Daniel Sussman, in a different interview on the same day, has a mildly more direct view of that budget when discussing developing Rock Band 4 in the current market environment for Western rhythm games. Here we are, an indie studio, working with one of the leanest development budgets we've ever had, on a tight schedule with a smaller team, and talking about building on Rock Band 3, which was the biggest game we'd ever made. As a result, I am unsure which of the two between Rock Band 3 or the Beatles' Rock Band was more expensive, but 4 was seemingly not getting anywhere close to either. That being said, a later September 2015 report noted that Harmonix raised over $15 million in investor funding on top of whatever the studio had already fronted for development. A fair guess would be the budget for 4 was likely in the ballpark of Rock Band 1 or 2 before additional investment funding. How much they put into this specific project, and if it matched or exceeded the $200 million they first received from the SpongeBob Industrial Complex, is a mystery. Back to the article, while the game was described as a platform from announcement, Alex gives a bit more detail as to what that actually meant. Going forward, our goal is to view it as more of a live service where we can gradually and incrementally append new functionality to the core experience rather than having $60 annual title updates. My point is, you shouldn't expect a Rock Band 5 in 2016. There are also a few images of new white and red instruments, with the red SKUs being confirmed as pre-order exclusives. The white instruments were not the defaults, and were sold separately from the game. Not sure why these were the first instruments publicly shown off alongside friend of the studio Gabe. nor why Mad Catz didn't showcase these images on their announcement blog or even talk about them, but I'm sure that the lack of marketing Rock Band products on their end won't continue to be a consistent problem. Oh look! Speaking of Mad Catz, a few days later on March 9th, their announcement blog from before adds a harmonics FAQ confirming some feature details not present in the initial announcement. The most notable for the purposes of this retrospective being the confirmation of backwards compatibility of the previous song DLC, as well as assurance that they are working on compatibility solutions for previous games' guitar and drum instrument peripherals for use with Fall. Both key staples from the previous entries, and insight as to what the survey results likely pointed to as crucial from the player base at launch. There was also confirmation that not only Pro Guitar, but the keys from Rock Band 3 as well would not be returning, and previously compatible charts for them would not carry over into Rock Band Fall. This would be the second major feature removal going into a sequel of the mainline series overall, with Rock Band 3's aforementioned removal of the Skull Duel and Tug of War competitive multiplayer modes being the first. On May 1st, IGN releases their next highlighted title for their first series, a curated month of exclusive media coverage highlighting an upcoming release, typically games. This is a partnered endorsement with the studios directly, with many articles and videos featuring interviews with the staff working on the project and detailing new features, gameplay footage, and sometimes insights into the design process in bursts over the course of 4 weeks. Throughout May, the highlighted game was, as I would hope you would not need to guess, Rock Band Fall. The promotion really takes off on the 15th, where they hosted a live stream unveiling its first public gameplay. This alongside a number of feature-focused videos where multiple developers are interviewed, paired with video demonstrations of said features. These gave an idea of the innovations they've made to the core design and gameplay loop. Ones outlined that made it into the final game include the new dynamic drum fills, with per genre and tempo appropriate fills to the song being played from a massive pre-recorded pool to play in sequence to activate Overdrive, the feature that doubles a player's score multiplier, instead of the series' classic fills seen here. Another being an early look at the show's gameplay mode, renamed from gigs in previous games, and possibly shortly before IGN did their livestream with harmonics based on this intro.
Here we're going to take a deep dive on the show's feature. We'd previously written a feature about this in the beginning of the month where we referred to it as gigs, right. But you guys have changed your nomenclature a little bit here.
We did. We have a lot of opinionated musicians at Harmonix, and they're like, I've played a lot of shows in my life. I've never played a gig.
This mode in the final release served as a variant of Quick Play, where players were given interstitial breaks between songs where they can vote on what's on the next set, or choose to play or not play an encore, in a lightly immersive roleplay of a live console experience. Many elements of the game at this stage of development differ from the launch release, including the Chart Highway UI being more visually reminiscent of Rock Band 1's interface, the UI for the show's song vote screens having slight differences, the significantly choppier frame rate of the character models in-engine, and notably cut features like being able to address and walk the crowd during shows via the microphone. Other notable content worth looking into from this promotion was the video How a Rock Band Song Gets Made, which gave insight to their charting process in-engine, as well as a brief overview and postmortem of a cancelled spin-off entry called Rock Band Sessions. This promotional material is still worth taking a look at, even now, for anyone like me who geeks out about early builds of major games and content left on the cutting room floor. The scope of the game from the coverage so far was focusing innovation on one major factor: immersion into the fantasy of playing in a band. A portion of the experience which was given somewhat less emphasis with every new entry over technical gameplay adds was now the central focus of the new features being brought in. And while one featured mechanic was ultimately cut and the remaining two still being somewhat in service to the note highway gameplay at its core, there was still one more major feature Harmonix had left to reveal, and the excited community only had to wait 1 month more before they saw it. June 16th, 2015, E3 is in full swing. The show floor was abound with impregnable, iconic titles. And among these titans, Harmonix drops another Rock Band Fall trailer consisting of 2 significant updates. The first being the unveiling of the freestyle guitar solo mechanic, a more rigidly structured variant of how classic fills have worked on the drums. Players tap on the upper or lower row of buttons on the neck based on the colored on-screen prompts during solo sections, timing strummed with visual rhythm prompts, and shredding unique solos with a bank of processor sounds based on the Positive Grid brand's Bias Effects library. The second, a release date of October 6th, 2015, just 4 months away. The story being told by the trailer clearly outlines what they are going for with the feature, as well as more clearly illuminates the scope of the game overall. Building up the immersion features for newer players or the initial market of casual party players that partially embraced the original in 2007. Shows, dynamic fills, and freestyle solos are primarily in service of the rock and roll fantasy roleplay, in lieu of expanding the instrument lineup or further iterating on re-implementing online competitive modes. The vocal sentiment of the gamers on announcement, at least in the comments of the trailers for this feature on Xbox, IGN, and Harmonix's official Rock Band channels and subreddit, was curiously what I'd coin hostile befuddlement, a mentality I figure the Overwatch community has been living in the past entire existence of two. While certainly there was hype from the community and gaming press outlets, most commenters had a lot of preference for the original charts and wanting newer features, criticism of the sound quality of the freestyle guitar, opinions on it as a lesser gimmick, and concerns that the visuals and performance were seemingly not improved from Rock Band 3 in the new graphics engine. While in general the Rock Band community was optimistic for the full package itself, the vocal crowd was weary with how the game was shaping up compared to other games on the next-gen consoles, and not gravitating towards the features intended to get them specifically into it. With the power of hindsight, these additions were entirely optional to the experience, which I go more into when discussing the game at release. They were likely not attempting to alienate longtime fans, but rather were reopening the pool to more casual players that were some of their earliest adopters. I acknowledge YouTube and Reddit comments are not fully representative of the audience as a whole, but it appears Harmonix was getting mostly critical feedback online outside of possibly their site's Rock Band forum, which no longer exists as of 2019 with seemingly no archive outside of a few select pages with links captured on the Wayback Machine. Do bear in mind that while no info exists publicly on focus tests for the game either, reception was presumably positive enough to launch the game as scheduled without delay. It was also possible that the majority of the audience intending to play it was choosing to be quietly optimistic or not actively following its development or gaming media promotion, but would be excited to see it at a Target or Walmart or GameStop when it was out.
Reload!
Whatever the case may have been, the public audience reception was reinforcing the idea that the game was indeed a risky gambit, as they had expressed during the announcement. Maybe more so than they anticipated and hoped. And there was still 4 months to go until they found out if it would all pay off. On July 13th, 2015, then product manager Eric Pope updated the Harmonix blog with the announcement of 10 more songs for the launch soundtrack, on top of the previously announced 11 songs from earlier promos. I've been relatively quiet on the announced songs for the game, as there's not really a lot to analyze on these drops compared to the features that were advertised alongside them, or even that much discourse on it that would be insightful to the development or of interest to analyze. This post is a succinct greatest hits of complaints about the series setlists or song DLC choices across all games media, the subreddit, and video announcements for over 15 years. Just add song requests and the occasional reply from someone linking the Harmonix song request site, and you have the authentic Rock Band comment experience. There wasn't much to unpack until the full 65-song setlist seen here was fully revealed, being done so through a series of blog posts from their July announcement through September 28th. While I did see a lot of praise for individual tracks and bands on there, and the genre spread and diversity, there was a lot of the skepticism that's always been in the discussion on why too much variety is bad or antithetical to its gameplay, and pleased to put less pop and more commercial rock mega hits everyone recognizes on there from the more dissenting opinions. Rock Band on-disc tracklists generally tiptoe between familiarity and being a gateway to something new for their players. They go for a mix of mainstream anthems, sleeper hits, one-hit wonders, tracks made popular from film and TV, songs from their internal bands within Harmonix, among a mess of other factors to ensure there's as much variety as possible. They maintain a delicate balance each time to put something instantly recognizable, as well as curate tracks from smaller artists and bands that they also want to show love to. On top of commercial recognition and musical quality, the songs also have to have a fun-to-play chart, and balance the setlist in a way that the difficulty scales from beginner training wheels tracks to insane button basher and pad smasher charts to make every type of player happy. One element the community clung to on both sides of the aisle was the fact that Harmonix were an indie studio now, with the impression that they likely had trouble securing big ol' names and songs for the disc tracks as the list filled out, and they didn't see the Rolling Stones' entire discography or whatever they were hoping for. And while certainly their budget and pre-existing relationships between artists and labels likely played a part in the number of tracks they went for and by which bands, coming down from the 83 tracks in Rock Band 3, with a lot of the returning mainstream acts from previous iterations being the big acts for this entry as well, I don't believe this was as big a limitation as hypothesized in early threads. Alex from his IGN interview earlier stated as much, that the budget for the base setlist allowed for some star power, and they pretty much did get it as much as any other entry had, especially by the end. I think the most salient observation these posts did have was that there was a lot of recognizable artists that were present, but were using deeper cuts not everyone would know. Tracks that players would discover through the game, while still having the familiarity of a famous name behind them. Commenters would interpret this both negatively, as if this was out of exasperation from licensing these artists' biggest tracks already in the weekly DLC or previous entries, as well as positively, acknowledging the early game's setlist showed Harmonix staff to be great tastemakers and would broaden the palette of the community player base to great tunes with fun charts. For what my 2 cents are worth, I was personally hyped for the songs I knew, and my college roommates as non-players got into it with me from the songs they knew from the radio and films they liked. So with my dome as the sample, the setlist succeeded for both new and old players. I personally thought the genre spread was solid, and I got into a fair number of the tracks I wasn't familiar with once I got my hands on the game, since most of their charts were fun, as I trusted would happen as it was the case throughout the series. However, I don't think we needed 2 U2 songs on disc, no matter how important their debut in rhythm games was, and I'll say that some of the retailer and platform exclusive tracks that were made pre-order DLC would have been much better suited to take one of those 2 spots. Sorry, Bono. And the Edge. On August 24th, Chris Bulkey, aka HMX Crisis, then Associate Community Manager, uploads a blog announcing a handful of songs, confirmation of game-only pre-orders being available at major brand retailers, and some of the purchase info for an Xbox One bundle that includes the Legacy Game Controller adapter. This was the solution for the Xbox 360 instrument backwards compatibility that Harmonix and Mad Catz were looking into back in March during the initial announcement. They also provided a link to an in-depth Rock Band 4 instrument compatibility chart for basically every officially released Rock Band and Guitar Hero instrument, confirming almost everything wireless from previous Rock Band entries would work with the Legacy adapter or natively with the console based on platform, while also deconfirming most wired instruments, non-Harmonix game-specific USB mics, Rock Band 3 Pro peripherals, and the Xbox version of the Ion Drum Rocker due to a tech constraint preventing the use of double foot pedals on that specific platform. In a post-release article from Samit Sarkar for Polygon, backwards compatibility from Xbox 360 to Xbox One was made more complicated due to them having different proprietary pairing components being made for the new controllers. Previously mentioned Harmonix project director Daniel Sussman elaborated, "We didn't have a lot of options given the degree to which the chipset and fundamental wireless technology changed between Xbox 360 and Xbox One." Senior Mad Catz product dev manager and tech director Richard Neville and Simon Bell respectively then gave a general outline of the intensive compliance testing process to make the adapter what it was at launch. This reiterates the level of importance they placed on backwards compatibility of instruments out of the box, understanding that many players would need assurance that their plastic assets would be able to carry forward like their digital ones have, and they looked into every avenue possible to allow for it with the Xbox Legacy adapter or natively with the PS4 hardware, both of which clearly provided a number of technical foibles between the both of them that different solutions were created to make cross-functionality work. PS3 to PS4 compatibility is different, as you can use the dongle that was required for PS3s to connect with instrument peripherals previously with the PS4. This is without the need to purchase an additional adapter like the Xbox by default, only a controller with a corresponding dongle. Alex, quote, "Big Boy Very," then global PR director of Mad Catz, told Sarah Morris of UK outlet Everybody Plays, now Outsiders, that PS4 players won't need the adapter, but he was either wrong, misspoke, or was misquoted because you absolutely needed the same PS3 dongle to use the PS3 instruments as confirmed by Harmonix in an IGN article 1 month prior. Mad Catz has a portal again showing signs of being asleep at the wheel promotion-wise. I acknowledge some of the signs might be revisionist history, as the website as it was is essentially gone, so most of their involvement on the game is covered secondhand. Journalists are usually quoting a harmonic source about Mad Catz, and typically I find it worrying when one portal is handling the bulk of the promo legwork for their own work as well as the work of another company who has their own PR division. And when the other finally does some promo, they neglect to mention something significant or get key details wrong that would mislead players who only read that source. But you know, mistakes happen. As long as they get quality peripherals and Xbox adapters out the door on launch with no issues, it'll all be under the bridge, right? The last major promotion ahead of launch came a few days after on August 31st, when the community manager from before, and of many of that year's blogs, Chris, posted about the Rock Band Road Crew, a limited entry rewards program where up to 500 fans in the US and Canada would win a band in a box bundle of Rock Band 4 on their platform of choice, as well as the opportunity to win more prizes by participating in Rock Band-centric events local to them or via social media called gigs. Gigs allow participating Road Crew members to gain points for completing challenges, such as hosting local community events and live streams, or doing any random fan activity that they can highlight on their socials. These points could be used to redeem prizes such as credit for DLC tracks, Rock Band merch, e-magazine subs, a semi-official rockbandroadcrew.com email address, etc. Some of the higher tier rewards included a limited edition guitar, unspecified if it was a game controller or a real branded instrument, but presumably the former, and live concert tickets, also left unspecified. All you had to do to enter was fill out an application form and put in a 1 to 3.5 minute video of you and some pals playing the game and explaining why you should be in the Rock Band Road Crew. They additionally asked to incorporate the phrase "Impressive solo" somewhere, but that was the extent of the video submission guidelines. You then found out on the week of September 14th by email from the Road Crew tour manager if you won. And I happen to be one of the Road Crew winners. Very impressive, yes. Thank you. A god amongst men. New mortals, absolutely. Please, thank you. You're too kind. I follow the pre-release as a longtime fan of the series, and my college roommates got into Rock Band 3 with me as something we could do while drunk in our dorm. So I recorded one of our weekly play parties and bumbled and stumbled a video together of us playing one night. I wish I could embarrass myself further than I already have by being a content creator to show you the application video, but it's sadly lost media because I only preserve the highest quality content I've ever made. Despite being in the crew, I was an awful Road Crew member. I don't remember being able to find many opportunities to do the gigs at my university, and instead put my time in other scholarly pursuits. So I think I just never ended up getting any of the prizes and squandered the opportunity for the most part, and I cannot remember how the gig system worked at all. I ended up reaching out to Chris, who directly signed off the last few emails as part of the Road Crew and drafted many of the Harmonix blog posts, who was kindly willing to answer some of my questions and elaborate on what I couldn't find through the archived Road Crew website. While much of the promotional materials and MailChimp emails are lost to the ages or in a Harmonix vault somewhere, she got back to me and provided an insightful overview of the program based on the questions I asked, and shared incredibly kind words for the Rock Band community. I have posted her comments without my interruptions on the Rock Band subreddit, linked in the description for you all to check out. Regarding the initial goal of the program, she noted the following. By and large, the Road Crew program was our way of bringing the Rock Band community together as we entered into the launch period for Rock Band Fall. We knew we wanted to strike up those conversations with old friends in the Rock Band community, and it was the perfect time to bring the crew together right before the next game in the series came out. What better way to drum up good presence for the game than by making it easier for the fans already doing so, right? Based on a lot of the research into the socials and blogs for the game, the community team were excellent at having their ears to the ground within the community. You can also see this in the lesser emphasized part of the program, the Road Crew member spotlights, blog posts highlighting members of the Road Crew from October through December. In terms of how big the team was who managed the program and vetted submissions, since the website mentioned only one tour manager, Chris states, the team who managed the Road Crew at Harmonix mostly consisted of community managers like myself and some of the social and marketing teams as well, so certainly not an individual effort. When asking for a more detailed breakdown on the gig's point system, she unfortunately did not have a full recollection of how it all worked, but was able to give the gist of it. I honestly don't remember the point value breakdown for gigs, but I'm sure the smaller tasks awarded less points overall, like posting to social media versus hosting a full battle of the bands in your local area. A lot of those in-person events run by road crew members were done locally, and at their own discretion. We really wanted to leave the creative freedom up to the crew for how they interacted with their own local communities. Very little around exists for what Harmonix had in terms of their own curated gigs. I saw one post from a frequent poster in the community, Triumphant Bass, or Bass, but I figured he wasn't super into Seamouse, referencing a quiz they were sent on bands that were featured in the game. I want to say I vaguely recall there were general open competitions with full bands that would get gig points if they hit a certain place on a manually tracked skull leaderboard by the tour managers, but I don't have any emails or screen caps of this. Absolutely leave a comment and let me know about you and your road crew experiences, because it was unfortunately one of the few areas I couldn't meticulously cover as part of the development history of the game, and part of the game's community I would love to also see preserved as well. We'll hear more from HMX Crisis later, as she also gave insight to a community Reddit AMA that I believe to be significant to the game's development, as well as the end of the road crew program, but all in due time. Going back to our timeline, road crew winners start to receive their band-in-a-box bundles between September 28th and October 5th, right before launch. And it's at this point, the earliest adopters of the game learn what Harmonix had not necessarily advertised about its feature set ahead of launch, which unfortunately was the kickoff to a myriad of issues that plagued both the player base and the development team themselves following the release. Rock Band 4 launches on October 6th, 2015, in the US, Canada, and Europe for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. I'll acknowledge in advance that there's plenty more to delve into when discussing this game than what I cover here, and I would not consider my look and analysis of the game itself at launch or in later builds as comprehensive as my coverage of its development history. Starting with the positives, the core gameplay loop itself didn't reinvent the wheel, and for the most part the quality of life improvements, such as being able to toggle all modifiers from the pause menu, as well as having an added buffer on some of the more awkward fast strumming and tapping portions on guitar or drum roll sections, were excellent. Every new feature was there as advertised: the freestyle guitar solos and an accompanying tutorial, the dynamic drum fills, and the new shows mode. The freestyle solos are fun for living out the rock fantasy elements they hoped party players would get a kick out of, and could be turned off for players who enjoyed playing the original and fully mapped charts. If you were playing the game caring about maintaining your multiplier and wanted to keep the soloing on, the timing of
1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E
was fairly rigid and not super well defined. It also didn't always sound great, because players didn't really have control over what sound was going to come out of the instrument from the pool of sounds decided for that track. Therefore, even nailing the timing, it might sound off, though it was probably more fun that way for the air guitar enthusiasts it was aimed at. But I'd imagine party-centric players would sometimes want to hear the original solo too. So while it is very impressive that they were able to add it retroactively to most tracks released before fall, you'd still have people turning it off when some of the more iconic tracks would come on. Fun gimmick, but a gimmick. At release, this feature could be turned off mid-song with the D-pad input or from the modifier menu, so completely optional and fairly unobtrusive depending on when you decide to turn it off. But as the primary distinctive feature of this title, that's sort of an issue if you can just rip it out and the game is just as fun. Dynamic and static fills are chart-centric ways to activate overdrive with either a custom Harmonix crafted fill or the original fill from the master recording, the latter of which finally let players play the full drum track charted without missing overdrive on purpose. Not that many people did that. If players preferred or didn't enjoy doing the freeform fills, now deemed as classic, you could turn on dynamic for the custom ones or static for the originals, all through the in-game pause menu at any time. The dynamic sounds were less jarring than the guitar sounds, and players were seemingly content but quieter about this smaller function online. I personally prefer static tracks since I can play along with the song chart directly, as I'm a bowling purist for these charts in most instances. Being able to auto-calibrate the audio and video settings using the guitar was a universally welcomed addition, as far as I could see, with myself personally loving the fact that it saved me time futzing with the manual calibration numbers. Instrument builds themselves were alright for me personally, but many others had gripes on feel, or had platform-specific connectivity issues that I'll go into in a bit. However, I do remember a lot of my griping was with the foot pedal's infernal creaking. The tour was a fun but limited choose-your-own-adventure campaign, structured after 2's World Tour, but with the show's gameplay mode at its heart. You play venue to venue on a gradually expanding selection of songs based on difficulty levels as you progress, voting on the songs you want to play, and unlocking new venues based on stall count in the geographical location you're in. Your mileage varies in terms of track variety, depending on your aforementioned toll progress, purchased DLC tracks, and your crew's collective music preferences when voting on a setlist. There are sub-challenges that yield more stalls from each player's performance during the gig, such as nailing solos or getting 5 stalls. You get to choose the type of rock toll fantasy your band wants to lead, making choices that portray your image as grungy road warriors true to the fans, or more into the glitz and glamour of the traditional label routes to get superstardom, with an assessment of your choices culminating in your legacy at the finale. Admittedly, this is all entirely through flavor text. The only real impact your choices make are being given certain rock shop cosmetics and instruments only or for free within the in-game economy, and said flavor text along the way is provided in loading screens. Gone are the animated cutscene transitions of 3, which isn't necessarily bad, but makes this toll mode feel less detailed than the previous offering. A lot of the menuing is also interspersed with positive grid bias ads, which is just an extra button press before you proceed with the game for a commercial. Product placement has its place, and the rock shop is and has always been rife with it instrument branding wise, but this is it at its most intrusive, albeit not so much as to be a genuine game killer. Touching on the character creator and rock shop customization options, both will significantly pale down. All the characters possible have more or less the same faces and builds, with the most customization coming from clothes and instruments having multiple color options for certain portions of the outfit or gear. It might have been scaled down for launch, since there was little reason for avatar customization with no online multiplayer component. Getting into the more inflammatory points at launch, there were glaring feature omissions for returning players of the series. One of the more minor changes was that quick play no longer allowed players to make custom set lists, making players play each song one at a time in this mode. Another feature dropped was the practice mode, which allowed players to practice specific parts of songs without having to play the full track, as well as being able to slow down the track to help nail specific inputs or timing. The most significant and contentious feature removal, however, was the aforementioned lack of online multiplayer. No online quick play, no online shows, no online story mode, no creating bands online. Only asynchronous play in the form of skull leaderboards for local full band play and individual players for each instrument. As far as I could find, the earliest deconfirmation of online play was near the end of June 2015, when in the comments of GameSpot's E3 stage demo coverage, commenters mentioned it would not be present, with one guy bashing the devs for not bringing it up to continue Games Media's sweetheart Danny O'Dwyer. Multiple commenters on the subreddit on July 16th asserted the same in a thread asking if the older competitive modes would be returning. None of these comments had citations, but they were presumably alluding to a thread or statements by the staff on the Rock Band forums addressing it that no longer exist. But they should have addressed it or referenced the forum post that has the disclosures in one of the blogs ahead of launch so players could make an informed purchase. Not only that, if you recall part of the project's scope, according to the co-founder Alex, they were returning Rock Band to what made it Rock Band. There were those that argued they did at a local level with its retention of the base gameplay loop and overall spirit of rock fantasy in the new editions, but others argued that with all 3 earlier mainline games having online multiplayer and the practice mode, both were core features to Rock Band. To them, their omission was counter to the established scope of the title, with Fall appearing as a less feature-complete experience than its predecessors. Cutting online multiplayer might have been a financial or logistical issue, which they do somewhat address later. Keep that in your pocket, I'll get there. But the same limitations would not be in place for the offline practice mode. All the songs are charted with their divided parts designated, as we saw in the IGN promotional footage. Might have been something they couldn't get finished in time with the release date they had, but they set that date. The only external pressure was the near simultaneous release of Guitar Hero Live, which was rumored and announced for release around the same time, which, to Harmonix's credit, almost assuredly was by design. But Harmonix was also the one that set that October date for basically both games back in June. With few public insights on budget or private investment, outside of the earlier reported 15 million plus, or industry forecasters or advanced knowledge of Activision's plans for Live setting that October date for them, the perception is that this limitation was self-imposed, and practice was not seen as important enough to fully implement for launch. Going through the subreddit at the time, players reported having to download firmware updates from Mad Catz to improve hit detection on the exclusive guitars made for fall, an extra step that most console games did not necessitate, and despite this would still experience connectivity issues. Hardware-wise, Bluetooth PS4 controls had random desyncs mid-gameplay that caused the instruments to not work without deleting and re-adding the instrument to their Bluetooth controllers list. A number of players reported hitching and delays, kick pedal note and fast drum drops, Bluetooth-related lag, a ghost yellow note input hold, referred to as scrambled inputs in one case, among others as part of the new hardware or within the game software itself. A number of these were directly addressed by aforementioned firmware updates during the first few months of launch. Players would also report more general performance issues across the previous instrument peripheral generations as well, either via the legacy adapter or older Bluetooth dongles. So ultimately, I will leave it at, there were performance issues that needed correction at launch, but player-specific issues potentially flagged some false positive bugs. Some might have been calibration foibles since auto-calibration made things easier, but it still wasn't perfect for all setups. And hell, some might have been skill issues. There was confirmed slowdown and lag cases instrument side, hardware side, and software side, but fixating on these is not the ultimate point of this retrospective timeline. Mad Catz also had issues beyond the quality of their instrument tech. They were unable to meet retailer fulfillment of Xbox Legacy adapter bundles at launch. Their PR genius from before, Alex Big Boy Very, when prompted for comment by Eurogamer's Tom Phillips as to why a number of major retailers were saying the game was out of stock on launch day, with Amazon specifically citing that they were still trying to obtain ordered products at their warehouses to fulfill, condescendingly blamed the fans for not pre-ordering. "We are thrilled at the reception both critically and commercially to Rock Band Fall, and have been overwhelmed with demand since pre-orders opened. For months now, we have been saying again and again how important it was to pre-order if you wanted to receive hardware on day one. We did warn that demand would be high," he stated, apparently missing the contradiction of being too overwhelmed by demand and pre-orders to fulfill said pre-orders, and sidestepping a presumed failure to anticipate and properly forecast retailer stock needs. To reiterate, Harmonix's manufacturing partner and co-publisher of the game weren't able to meet manufacturing needs for the day of launch, at least for Xbox One SKUs, and their suit was faux apologetic that prospective buyers didn't pre-order more stock that the company had yet to fulfill. It's not a generous read of their response, but jumping the gun a bit, the adapters never exactly became plentiful following the initial launch months. In terms of critical reception, press outlet reviews were all mostly positive. The examples I have here were forgiving in a lot of areas, with the game itself being a good time, and the freestyle solo feature being highlighted as a refreshing gameplay mechanic reinvigorating the series. The biggest complaints being it was feature-light compared to its predecessor, and the main track list was hit or miss. On the Rock Band community end, many seem to echo the sentiment that this is a solid foundation that can be built on, and were amenable to patches and updates to improving the game over time. In one of the more critical threads, with Redditors hypothesizing why the lip-sync animations were so off in the new rendering engine, a lot of the more forgiving responses gave the smaller team and budget rationale many had for the on-disc track list. There was also an implication that Harmonix might have felt, like some fans, that the animations weren't necessarily the most pressing priority to ship a gold build for release. There was also a lot of supposition of potential time constraints, with the hope that the animations would be moved into higher priority over time. A lesser known controversy was when on October 21st, a throwaway Reddit user, Cameron9, created a thread with evidence that Harmonix employees posted positive reviews for the game on Amazon. They were masquerading as fans with no disclosure they worked for the company, which breaks Amazon's terms of service. The outlet Destructoid reported on this, and received a statement from Harmonix the next day acknowledging this happened, stating they have asked these employees and one consultant to either append their reviews with appropriate disclosure or delete them. These reviews disappointed members of the community, but its impact seems to have been relatively inconsequential to the rest of development outside of some snarky comments at the time. Post-launch update patches were first confirmed in advance of the launch in a blog post on September 25th, while announcing the first major feature update to release on December 8th. Then product manager Daniel Sussman makes a point to reiterate the game is once again a platform, as the team had been emphasizing since the game's reveal. They were planning to add mostly unspecified social and competitive features, in addition to feedback-based fixes they would be getting from players post-launch. He also teases a new gameplay mode and outlines the most fleshed out addition, variable breakneck speed, which is Rock Band's version of Guitar Hero's hyperspeed play option, which hastens the speed of the note highway in degrees up to 5. Base Rock Band 4 has a breakneck speed option, but it's an on and off toggle set to what would be about 1.5 speed on the variable options, which could be either too fast or too slow for some players hoping to utilize the function. This variable version would also be locked to individual player tracks, so it wouldn't impact other players who might want it kept off on their highways. One curious note was the emphasis on this being a free update. Rightly or wrongly, this was the expectation of most players without it needing to be directly specified. It was a patch that happens to include a bonus gameplay feature for a full-price AAA game release, which was the standard during this console generation. Other later updates really emphasize how completely free it is, which would only become notable if there was precedent for later updates to not be free. I've asked you to keep a lot of things in your pocket for later, and this is yet another one. Sorry for starting to get crowded in there. 10 days after launch on the 16th, an additional interim patch is announced with a tentative release for the last week of the month, mostly addressing and squashing bugs and additional quality of life audio features. Alongside these update patches, there would be a handful of DLC track marketplace issues, which were primarily focused on in 2 dev blogs in November. The first on November 2nd expounded on the most notable global issues players were experiencing since launch, and providing workarounds and confirmation of fixes where applicable. Reading into them demonstrates the volume and complexity of some licensing or console manufacturer marketplace hangups Harmonix had to deal with simultaneously. Another major set of DLC and bundle stock supply issues were addressed by them on the 12th, where sentiment with European PlayStation players appears to have been dire enough to make a statement. This post addressed that 431 song errors were present in the SCEE Sony regional group, which was made worse by the North American SCEA region having fewer, but simultaneous issues as well. They also state they are working with Mad Catz on a lack of instrument bundles being available in Europe overall. This appears to have been an expanded continuance of the previous month's Xbox One bundle shortages overall. To address alongside the rest of the DLC woes post-launch, there were a number of compatibility issues and lack of availability of the previous game's export tracks. To spare everyone, myself included, from spending too much time bogged down on this, a number of the previous games had exports of their libraries to be used in other games. For example, Green Day Rock Band came with a pack-in code to bring all those tracks to the mainline Rock Band games via the console marketplace, and Rock Band 1 had an update giving an option to export the majority of the tracks as DLC for use with Rock Band 2 and beyond, for I believe $5. You can check out this mega thread for further reading of export issues at the time if you're interested, as well as further updated mega threads documenting export compatibility later on that are linked within. The important thing to note is that they weren't just having to crush bugs and implement features on the new game, but also a number of marketplace bugs and licensing issues they had to work through externally with Sony and Microsoft Marketplace staff at the same time. On November 19th, the blog unveils more info about the bug fixes and feature adds for the aforementioned December update. Highlights being a few leaderboard-based updates, the previously mentioned variable breakneck speed options, an asynchronous multiplayer taunt feature that let you send a comical walled salad insult their way, challenging them to take back their leaderboard score when you beat them, an auto-kick accessibility option toggle, new cosmetics in the rock shop, a full combo UI indicator during gameplay, and post-song audio flail by then QA lead Chris Rando. AV calibration improvements, among bug fixes and other optimizations. They commit to give monthly updates, smaller in scale than the upcoming December patch, but confirm they are tackling the backlog of features from the previous games, new features exclusive to fall, and improving stability with the upcoming patches. They also make a note for players to continue to be vocal with their feedback in the community, stating the community's responses will play a part in the priority of fixes and features in the future. On December 7th, the day before the big update drops, they fully show off the update's last major feature, the brutal mode gameplay type, which obscures the majority of notes on the highway after spawning and leaving notes invisible at the input register when it's their time to be hit. Players would need to time a few seconds in advance as a result, making for a fairly difficult challenge on the more intense charts, but not as impossible as if the notes were fully invisible. Gold stars, exclusive to expert level charts and granted through optimal overdrive activations and consistent max multiplier note streaks with little or no mistakes, become crimson stars in brutal mode, as a fun differentiator. This all comes out on the 8th as promised, and while there was a lot of praise for it on the subreddit, players and general commenters on YouTube were less receptive to the mode, either for its comparisons to similar modes present in its genre contemporaries, or for the features deemed missing from the game being perceived as sidelined in favor of brutal mode. These types of comments were not new, but the vitriol was starting to get harsher and more prevalent throughout November and early December, with no word about the missing features returns. Even when addressed less harshly by their fans in other posts, it was very clear that whatever their previous survey data was, it significantly underestimated the priority of at least online play and practice mode. Whether it was a misinterpretation of the data, where players voted for other features with higher priority, assuming the previous core features would be default available at launch, which it seems to have at least partially been, which I'll get to in a later section, or even if it was purely a time frame issue to beat out Guitar Hero Live. These features not being present was becoming the biggest talking point about this game post-launch, and it would only be 1 week following the December 8th update when the team decided to directly address these criticisms head-on. The next major dev blog, released on the 15th, was titled The Future of Rock Band Fall. Returning plot-important side character Danny Sus, as no one calls him, thanked fans for their support of the franchise and the latest title so far, going on to confirm that the Harmonix crew pledges to be more transparent about the roadmap for updates, given the requests of many players. Starting with some of the smaller missing features, he states, "We hear the request for practice mode and set lists loud and clear, and are thrilled to give you the only heads up that both of these features are on our schedule and will be coming for free in 2016. There was a good amount of design work to figure out the best way to incorporate those features into Rock Band Fall, and also to consider ways to improve on the implementation from Rock Band 3. That said, the team is committed to bringing these back as soon as possible." Which this was good news. He addresses a reasonable rationale for why it was missing, and that they are indeed returning to the game, albeit without a time frame more specific than next year. He introduces online play as a topic in a peculiar way, however. We know it's at the top of a lot of people's want list. That conversation goes back to E3. He's likely referring to Rock Band forum discussions lost to time, referenced indirectly by comments covered only from June 2015 proclaiming its removal. As a result, it comes off as odd in retrospect, as this conversation no longer exists or can be referenced. It was also likely closer to a one-sided announcement than a real conversation. Regardless, he proceeds with rationales giving some general insight on why it was left out. Online play with Rock Band is a big deal given the amount of different combinations of player, full potential instruments, different difficulties, song affinities between players, etc. There is a ton of testing necessary, as well as technical backend to walk through in order to provide a fun, stable experience. While certainly true, they seem to have worked all of that out on a local level by this point. They had also done the same for, again, all previous Rock Band games. I would have figured the bigger issue would be the cost of hosting and maintaining multiplayer servers on their own for the projected audience size ahead of launch. Projections that might have been more up in the air or skewed towards operation losses given the franchise's time away from the spotlight. And as established previously, most fan explanations for any issues at this point was essentially smaller team, smaller budget. However, costs were not emphasized here. A second rationale Daniel provides, For any feature development, especially features that have existed in our legacy Rock Band games, we want to be able to improve and refine wherever possible. In the case of online play, we have a lot of critical feedback on the Rock Band 3 design that we'd love to be able to address. He does not elaborate on what this feedback was, closing this section with a link to an online multiplayer-focused survey to provide feedback on what the game type should entail from the player's perspective. This is unfortunately lost to time, with no archived webpage during the survey's active period, nor articles from then outlining some of the options like the previous survey had. No specific time frame, just a confirmation that it's on the docket and they will release the very complex feature when it's ready. A reason for why they couldn't bring the same multiplayer suite from previous games to fall was never directly addressed by the team, only which metrics led to its removal outside of the blog, which I cover later. One possibility being that this could have been the first time Harmonix developed online multiplayer for the series in-house. The previous main Rock Band title's multiplayer functionality utilized Kazal Technologies Inc.'s 3 cross-platform multiplayer prefabs, solutions that became Ubisoft's property in 2010. Though Kazal seemingly continued external services during 2014 and 2015 before their apparent complete absorption sometime after May 26, 2019. Speculating here, but Rocksmith being a competing title in the rhythm game space possibly flattened any opportunity for Harmonix to relicense it. The team might have heavily relied on using and adjusting this specific middleware solution for their online multiplayer needs, and might not have been able to find, or be able to budget, an equitable replacement for it. This would then necessitate building a system from scratch, possibly without existing software assets, infrastructure, or available technical staff able to build one from the ground up while also building the foundations of the game itself. While these are all reasonable rationales for the missing feature, it is understandably not the most flattering image to project of your team in a promotional blog. So somewhat counter to this blog's emphasis on giving the Rock Band audience more transparency moving forward, they don't address this criticism from players and commenters requesting online multiplayer to be added to the platform. But in fairness, being cagey on back-end details is not exclusive to Harmonix, and rarely do we ever get insights on decisions made in a public-facing manner. Though something about this blog that was only notable in hindsight, intentionally or otherwise, he did not state the online multiplayer update would be free, like every other introduced feature in the post. Daniel rounds out the blog addressing other notable compatibility requests having solutions in the works, reiterating the desire to satisfy and expand the Rock Band community with new and returning features, announcing a stability and performance-based patch for January 2016, and providing an update on previous game export entitlements. There is also a subdued recommitment that updates will be monthly going into 2016, starting with the upcoming January update. Before signing off, he notes that they were also hosting an AMA on the Rock Band subreddit the same day, and reopening the Harmonix feedback email, stating that every email gets read. The AMA was put up the same morning, to which a number of Harmonix staff from across the studio spent at least 6 hours answering the questions coming in from fans. This included Daniel from before, then lead designer and writer of many Harmonix titles Ali Threschel, then community and social lead Josh Harrison, VP of Creative Helen McWilliams, and then Associate Community Manager Chris HMX Crisis, who provided comment from before. When I asked about this blog and AMA, if it had been planned in advance ahead of launch, or if it was more of a reaction to a lot of the feedback they'd been seeing online, Chris responded, "It was probably a mix of both, responding to the community's most burning questions and sharing some news about future plans for the title, so players could know what to expect. Providing that transparency goes a long way when you have a fan base as dedicated as the Rock Band community." I want to emphasize and reiterate that every dev working on Rock Band 4 appeared to put their all into this project. Going through this thread and ultimately all of this history shows how much more transparent and connected this team was to its community compared to its contemporaries then and now. Even if not everything was perfect, they handled criticism and communication better than I'd argue the majority of AAA publishers and studios do. This thread is evidence of that. Taking in feedback in a considerate way, being honest about shortcomings and potential solutions with no date on their roadmap, and explicitly not making half-hearted promises to features being requested that are not in the cards or anything else that is out of their power to provide, while also not ignoring the questions to do so. And it was nice to see a lot of the feedback on the community side being mostly constructive and littered with appreciation for the team. and not every question was about Rock Band Fall, but the series in general, and the usual song and artist requests, other projects like the remake of Amplitude, unreleased games like Rock Band Japan, and other generally silly questions that demonstrate the warm atmosphere of the community. In regards to Rock Band Fall's development directly, features addressed in the blog were mildly present, but there were many requests focusing on older game song exports as mentioned previous, some of which had delivery timeframes announced through this thread. Some requested compatibility of the Ion Rocker kit for Xbox One, which players are told a solution was actively being worked on, but that there was no ETA at this time. One perceived issue that was frequent was the lack of gender switching of feminine or masculine vocals like in 3, which was confirmed as an inclusivity design decision and not a bug or an element of a feature being cut for time. Other similar design insights were brought to light from then development lead and senior producer John Venerin. He joined the thread and answered some of the more in-depth questions people had, as someone who vetted a number of details planning the game's development and rollout up to launch. He went into detail as to why the character creator was less intensive than the previous, which was chalked to the impracticality of making a creator at the same scale of Rock Band 3's at the time of launch, with their new physically based rendering graphics engine. He also confirmed plans were in place to expand it to get it closer to the previous cosmetic suite. He also confirmed specific members of the team are assigned to this specific feature suite moving forward, and the system was built with additional expansion in mind. He also went into fairly significant detail regarding what happened to the cut vocal crowd interactions seen in the IGN false premiere of the game, which was cut following implementation and testing, as there wasn't a great way for the game's AI to determine an engaging or entertaining response from the crowd for players in the same way another human player could when prototyping. I reached out to John for comment regarding other elements of the roadmap and development of the game leading up to launch, but did not hear back from him as of this release. Would love to make an addendum if he or other developers on the game have more of the nitty-gritty inside details they'd be willing to share. HMX Josh established a few notable details as well, with possibly the onlyest confirmation that lapsed export songs from earlier games were open to be re-licensed and sold as DLC. He noted for the Gamer Skull Fiends in the thread that there were compliance limitations on adding achievements and trophies to free game updates, for those wondering why Brutal Mode didn't have any in the patch, as well as a deconfirmation of a Rock Band Network return plan for the console releases. Console specification is mine, more on that later. The last of the significant insights I'll cover from this AMA was a question asking if the game is considered a financial success to Harmonix Brass. Josh confirms Harmonix is pleased with the sales figures, enough to give the green light for their planned updates into the majority of 2016. When an additional user follows up to confirm if additional updates were planned into 2017 and beyond, Josh says that the plans as of December 2015 have only been laid out for 2016, but there was not a set end-of-life date for Rock Band full support as of this time. I felt this important to highlight, as it tells us that the game was profitable enough to hit a required metric for continued support, a rare confirmation on their finances that they don't usually put out there publicly. There are no specific numbers for units sold that I could find, only references a number of outlets cited from NPD that it was the 10th best-selling game overall in October 2015, but did not place higher in the coming months. This is not to say it didn't sell well, only that specific figures are not public knowledge as to how well the game sold overall. There is an over $100 million sales figure attributed to Daniel Sussman in a later Polygon article from July 2016. But in terms of units sold, we only know it sold modestly compared to other AAA releases during its primary shelf life. It at the very least sold more units than Guitar Hero Live during the launch month, and based on that game's particular fate, it likely outsold it overall. On January 21st, a blog releases confirming that the January update is to be delayed to a week later in February due to an exploit dubbed Overdrive Squeeze. This exploit was outlined by HMX Josh on the subreddit on January 11th, basically allowing players to conserve overdrive throughout a chart in a way that solo players couldn't on their own. Since the game took your highest score on any given song when you were with a full band, players were using this to hit scores past the theoretical max solo chart scores, thus making the top scores impossible to reach as a solo player. Josh goes into details in the blog post that the correction of this exploit caused an additional scoring bug that wasn't corrected ahead of passing console certification of the January patch. Therefore, they needed to resolve it and restart the certification process, delaying the update to February. While the news wasn't good news exactly, it was great that the team was again demonstrating a high level of transparency to explain the situation following their commitment to doing so the previous December. The patch releases on February 2nd, primarily fixing the exploits, along with other general gameplay and audio fixes. On March 1st, Harmonix launches a Rock Band Fall PC port campaign on investor-centric crowdfunding site Fig, now part of the Republic platform. The campaign, running from 1 month through April 5th, asked for $1.5 million to bring the game to PC via Steam release. Their cost estimate for the port, specifying none of the money would be going to the console versions of the game, was stated as $2 million, with $500,000 being from Harmonix directly. Development was set to be partially in-house by a few smaller technical teams that worked on the original Rock Band Fall, alongside primary development support from external studio Sumo Digital, and planned to be in simultaneous update and DLC parity with the console versions at the time of its fall 2016 release window. With no formal roadmap, it was surprisingly sparse on development details, given the big transparency push the Harmonix blogs had been touting only 1 month prior. There was, however, one major feature exclusive, somewhat elaborated on for this PC port: the planned return of the Rock Band network. For those unaware, and who might have skipped the earlier primer in a vain effort to get some time back, the Rock Band network, as described in this campaign, was a set of tools that allowed you to take your own song audio, add MIDI information, and create song files playable by Rock Band 3, plus server infrastructure to upload those songs to Xbox Live and sell them. With this incarnation of the program, they were planning on trading Microsoft's XNA Creators Club infrastructure built for the Xbox 360 titles for the more accommodating Steam Workshop. This would very likely have made it more accessible for casual users to utilize the platform comparatively, as well as set the groundwork for the game to receive support in perpetuity by dedicated community members, a luxury that the console releases unfortunately would not have shared whenever Harmonix, and now Epic, decides to fully sunset them. The FAQ pointed out information most pertinent to existing players hoping to make the jump to the PC. Controller compatibility was seemingly squared away for anything USB wired and Bluetooth, but the Xbox One instruments were not confirmed. And more significantly, none of the console DLC rolls over to PC, and libraries would need to be repurchased. Songs no longer available for sale and exports would not make it to the port. Previous Rock Band Network songs would need to be reformatted and relicensed, which they appeared hopeful past artists and show creators would do. Going through backer rewards, fans were promised the usual amongst goodies alongside copies of the game. Depending on their tiers, backers would also receive the previously released game The City Sleeps and its soundtrack, and a Best of Indies DLC pack that included 3 indie game tracks: March of the Profane from Crypt of the Necrodancer, Astro Sight by Intersect featuring Noel LeBlanc and Naoko Takamoto from Amplitude, and Cabbage Boy from Brutal Legend. I'd say that EA published game really stretches the definition of indie there. Backers could also receive an unspecified separate pack with an additional 30 songs. You'd get into the credits after spending a small pittance of at least $150, which also moved into the prestige items offered for the campaign, such as receiving a signed guitar controller, exclusive developer points of contact, a Harmonix studio tour, VIP access for their PAX East party that year, dinner with the co-founder Alex Rigopoulos, or, massive all in quotes, LucasArts game designer and Double Fine studio founder Tim Schafer. It's left unstated what the beef they had between them was, to the point where they couldn't bury the hatchet at a Buca de Beppo with you in attendance. However, you as the backer would have had to choose which one of them would be eating dinner alone that night, since they seemingly refused to do it together. The most expensive backer reward was having you or your band's song as free DLC in the PC port for a small investment of $25,000. Not sure of the financial return percentages you would get as an investor at each deal, one of the distinctions Fig had as a platform, as breakdowns were not in the pitch, or elaborated subsequently in the updates still archived. Over the course of the campaign, they would add other tiers, such as a $1,000 promotal tier which allowed up to 5 backers each to design a t-shirt and hat to be added to the workshop, and a collector tier at $2,500 which promised the entirety of all DLC tracks ever added, though with licensing caveats, so likely no Metallica track pack as an example. This latter tier was likely a result of disappointment in having previous adopters repurchase their libraries again, though I don't think buying it all again at the convenience of one time for maybe half the theoretical price is really solving that problem. The responses to this campaign from the community was the most outwardly negative I've ever seen from them. I've tried to emphasize that this community, from what is still available, again, no real archive of the Harmonix forums, generally goes out of their way to be overly protective of the company. They would often be somewhat constructive with their criticisms, and would actively attempt to stamp out dissent harsher than a mild-mannered critique. To a degree, the same applies here, but most of the posts from the subreddit and on the updates of the FIG campaign were fairly brutal even when civil. The prevailing sentiment appeared to be that this campaign was rushed out the door at the worst time possible. On one hand, it was done far too soon for a title that many considered to be unfinished, with significant core features either being left out or lacking depth. On the other hand, it was far too late, as the series faithful likely already bought the new console generation just to play the latest entry, since PC wasn't going to be an option throughout all of 2015's press cycle. A lot of the back and forth present in the subreddit was about the asking price of 1.5 mil, and with it being a part of a game that apparently sold well per Josh previously, being juxtaposed to bigger and more ambitious campaigns in the indie AAA space for more modest goals. It's hard to really say how justified the asking price is, both as an industry outsider and since there's so few details about what it would be allocated to in terms of Sumo Digital's dev labor and resource costs. At least not without showing it up by making possibly off-base assumptions and pulling financial estimates right out of my ass. And this was before the common user would know that successful AAA game crowdfunding campaigns with more modest goals were mainly to show buyer interest to private investors on the back end. The perception at the time seemed to be if Mighty No. 9 could be developed for $900,000 for PC, then released for all past and current gen consoles of the era at roughly $1 million per console generation in stretch funding, why does one enhanced PC port cost $1.5 million? There was a FIG campaign update by then design lead Matthew Noel D. Nordhaus that loosely addressed the price tag by giving a high-level outline of the labor required, but there were no useful numbers to demonstrate their anticipated work forecasts. Therefore, the only thing to glean from the update is game development in itself is costly, which is admittedly true to the scale of AAA titles and studios of their size, but not exactly helpful to say to potential investors or backers to justify calculations they are not presenting. On top of the previous misconception regarding crowdfunded game budgets, this was also a time where AAA PC ports were starting to be in the news for being notoriously buggy and with terrible performance at launch. However, there were less industry insiders speaking to the myriad dev troubles that compound on the platform exclusively. Players weren't really being informed on the struggles and costs of said ports. The perception of the time that PC ports required less work and were cheaper to produce is, even if technically and literally true with numbers, an underestimation of the work and budget needed for another dev cycle and production one for a AAA retail release. There was also significant criticism about the lack of marketing overall for the campaign. The first and only AMA for the campaign was hosted on March 30th, a week before it ended, that Josh, Chris, and Noldy conducted on r/PC Master Race to drum up support for the poll. But not much of note was addressed outside of a marketing plan to not really market or advertise the campaign. Everything else was mostly off-topic or general harmonics, with a few confirmations about the project sprinkled in. Ones like they hadn't started porting the game ahead of the campaign, compatibility of wired instruments like the Ion Rockle, and why anything other than the Steam Workshop won't work for Rock Band Network PC. I find the most important chain is the massive wall scrolling on your screen now, where a lot of concerns get put forward and addressed in return about if FIG was only chosen based on Harmonix co-founder Alex Rogopoulos being on its board, and why that was not disclosed in any campaign materials. How much of the invested funds were from investors rather than backers? Why not Kickstarter or Steam Greenlight with larger audiences than Fig comparatively? Why there's concern over the large asking price for a pult with no price breakdown? The potential audience disconnect of using this campaign with all of its perceived flaws and lack of marketing on a less popular crowdfunding platform as being indicative of total interest, among many other issues and comparisons to other crowdfunding campaigns. There's a lot to unpack here, which I invite you to do for yourself if deep diving old crowdfunding discourse gets your blood flowing, but ultimately the point is, there were many concerns and skeptical opinions on the campaign rollout that were not assuaged by this AMA's content or timing. The campaign closed on April 5th, hitting 52% of the 1.5 million goal at $792,817. They had a thank you post as the last and final update, expressing the appreciation for the support they did receive and disappointment the pult would not be moving forward at this time. It's in this post where they try to combat some of the more critical points the community was addressing with them throughout, but hadn't really tackled in a meaningful way. I think this update unfortunately hits the same points of failure that the community managers couldn't spin in a more positive light previously. They elected to do very little promotion and anticipated fans to do the bulk of this legwork outside of what Fig's apparently minuscule Facebook ad budget allotted. They gave no direct insight as to what was going into the pult to justify the high price tag to potential backers and investors. Despite saying they did, the linked post is the one from before that says basically nothing. They acknowledged the complaint that the timing was the worst it could be for this particular project and gaming platform by saying they wanted to release a PC build simultaneously with consoles, but couldn't with their limited resources. They try to contend against the idea that if they had to crowdfund a pult post-launch that the game should be feature complete before the campaign, by basically sidestepping the point altogether and saying that this was being developed separately from the console SKUs, as if it wasn't the same game. They really couldn't argue back on Fig itself as a new kid on the block, with little word of mouth being the wrong call to use if they sincerely wanted to gauge consumer interest, so they didn't, and only claimed there wasn't enough interest again since the campaign didn't succeed, to most of the commenters' chagrin. That being said, the most popular argument to counter it, that the campaign would have performed better on Kickstarter, is impossible to really prove. We can't know how well it would have done there since they didn't do it. This was not a flexible funding campaign, so all money was returned to investors and backers. The Best of Indies track pack announced as a reward was unfortunately never released to my knowledge, but the additional 30-song track pack was very likely the 30-song mega pack. This pack was publicly announced on April 4th, a day before the closure of the campaign. This pack consists of Harmonix staff band's music, mostly from previous entries for those who didn't or weren't able to buy the exports when they were available. This did not thrill commenters on the YouTube announcement for a number of reasons, as exports were still not being fulfilled that would grant them these songs if they had them as exports, along with the usual "never heard of them" comments from the less constructive critics. If there was anything to say about the community at this time, the fans were indeed passionate about Rock Band Fall. However, the financial passion Harmonix brass were hoping for was already given to them in their previous recent endeavors. These same fans already spent upwards of $750 on a new gen console and the Band-in-a-Box kit for the same base title only months prior. Any fans open to crowdfunding their projects already had in 2014, and were waiting on the complete fulfillment of their rewards. Management might have wanted to consider these factors before rolling out the Fig campaign, asking these same super fans to bankroll the majority of a pult for a game they very likely already had. Long-standing wounds were opened by this campaign at a very crucial time for the game. It seemingly burned a lot of goodwill they had accrued up to that point, and Noldy and the community managers took the brunt of the hostility that management's lack of foresight caused. As the team continued trying to maintain the remaining goodwill from their audience, it would be burned once again during the next phase of the platform. Before we move along, a particularly odd element of the Fig campaign was the lack of acknowledgement of the co-publisher of the game, Mad Catz. There were never clear details about a Band-in-a-Box bundle planned for the PC SKU, only that supporting wireless peripherals would be made available. These were apparently planned to be PS4 Bluetooth peripherals, presumably with adjusted branding, Poll Josh in the Ladle AMA. While it would have been safe to presume these would have been handled by Mad Catz at the start of the campaign, there is one announcement I haven't quite mentioned yet. Going back in time briefly to March 7th, Harmonix updates the Rock Band Fall site FAQ to include information on a new partnership with PDP, also known as Performance Design Products, most well known seemingly for their Afterglow gamepad. No blog appeals to have been released for this announcement directly, but gaming press outlets such as Game Informal and GameIndustry.biz elaborate further with their reporting. The role is that PDP took the co-publishing reins from Mad Catz directly after Harmonix kicked them to the curb, and will be releasing a new line of instruments in autumn of 2016. This is after a string of financial issues, corporate shakeups, and subsequent layoffs within Mad Catz before and after the game's launch, banking on product fulfillment. In June 2016, there was a minor press statement showdown between then Harmonix CEO Steve Janiak and then Mad Catz CEO Karen McGuinness, presenting conflicting statements on whether or not the demand or lack thereof for Rock Band Fall had shelves empty or full during the holiday 2015 season. Mad Catz being unable to fabricate the requisite number of instrument peripherals and adapters during launch has already been documented. Therefore, it's safer to assume they did not meet the demand they took out significant loans attempting to fulfill, rather than overproduced due to a lack of demand. Keep in mind, this is still speculation based on prior articles, and likely the responsibility lies somewhere in the middle. Mad Catz eventually shuts down in March 2017, with the name being sold and eventually resurrecting less than a year later under new management. PDP was for the most part pretty quiet during their time as co-publisher, and they didn't seem to have a sterling reputation with gamers at the time, likely coming from their previous incarnation as Pelican Accessories. Then April 24th comes around. The Harmonix PAX East panel announced the timeframe to deliver their most requested features. Players finally get a timeframe for quote, synchronous online multiplayer at the end of the year, along with double kick support in May, and the long-awaited practice mode in June. An unspecified at this point expansion pack was announced for fall, along with announcing library enhancements, which were described as the song filtering options also oft requested, and the announcement of a PDP legacy drum adapter to allow functionality of the Ion Rocker drum kits and compatible MIDI E-kits. Lastly, they announced they would go into further detail into the coming expansion during that year's E3 in June. The cosplay cosmetics of Randy Pitchford's contribution to the Rule 34 community notwithstanding, all of this was what the community had been clamoring for. The Associated Recap blog called their upcoming June update returning the practice mode as the end of the game's Chapter 1, and the expansion would be the start of an ambitious Chapter 2. E3 was just around the corner, and all the great developments from this update make it all really bittersweet retroactively, with the context that this is the last committed roadmap for the game the fans receive for the rest of the service title's lifespan. In terms of the PDP co-partnership, the promise of a new legacy drum adapter and a new instrument production line seemed like an optimistic start. But all players really had to cling on to was hope that more was coming in terms of the requested adapters for further backwards compatibility, the ease of access to getting new instrument peripherals, and the fabrication of both being free from short or limited manufacturing runs. Which, like, if I'm Mr. PDP, and I see the shit show that was Mad Catz's production press cycle as a lesson on what not to do, you would imagine I'd go out of my way to maximize accessibility to our peripherals, with plans for smaller volume, but longer term and sustainable production runs, and no artificially small windows for orders and fulfillment to blame the other partner on later. Because what dumbass clown organization would I be running if we did anything like the May 3rd update comes along with the promised double kick support and bug fixes? Same goes for the June 14th patch, adding back practice mode along with more bug fixes. Then E3 rolls around, and compared to the PAX East drop, fans are left with more questions than answers. Harmonix unveiled the name of the new expansion, Rock Band Rivals. And what is Rivals? At that specific time, one would only know it was an expansion called Rock Band Rivals that would be priced at $30 standalone and would have, quote, new modes. However, their focus was solely on a few of the peripherals and accessories releasing in or alongside the eventual Band in a Box bundle, as they were being hosted by the PDP booth this year. They hyped the new blue Fender Jaguar and demoed the base game with it to those in attendance. There was general assurance of it being more responsive and of better build quality, but they really emphasized its bendable neck, which was easier for storage and travel. They also had a guitar charger accessory you could purchase separately for $30. The Rock Band TM Fender registered trademark Jaguar guitar charger. And they showed off the previously announced Rock Band Full Wild Legacy adapter for Xbox One, also $30, which let you use essentially all wild drum peripherals on the Xbox SKU. No delivery times on these, with the assumption they would be ready around the launch of Rivals in the fall based on the PAX East roadmap. And that was their E3 2016 promotional rollout. Updates or skulls coming out of E3 with the plan to have more informative blogs throughout the next few months until release. There was a bit of controversy as a result, with at least a subreddit showing significant frustration at the lack of info during the biggest consumer-facing conference of the year, especially after Harmonix specifically hyped up how much would be shown of the game at E3 during their PAX coverage. The main reactions were of bewilderment, being unsure what Rivals actually was outside of how much they were expected to pay for it. HMX Josh fielded one of the more since deleted critical posts, which his response cited the lack of information was one part due to undisclosed changes to planned features, once necessitating more time in the oven to be ready for public consumption. A second part by having their hands somewhat tied joining PDP at their booth instead of hosting their own, as if it was some professional faux pas to promote their shared venture. It's a bit contradictory to say it would have been bad form to show more in someone else's booth when the someone else is co-publishing the game. Like, you aren't strangers business-wise. You didn't hijack a humble, unaffiliated Nataku booth which might have impeded the shilling of their hentai gachas. PDP has a stake in the game and its success. They wouldn't be mad to promote what is also their product. But to be fair, he is addressing decisions he didn't really make, so he's doing his best here. There was also disillusionment many had about this expansion after reading between the lines of the PAX East announcements in an attempt to find more info. It was caught at this point that the verbiage on the online multiplayer announcements was going to lock it as an update to the expansion. Rivals was now being seen as a way to charge $30 for the online multiplayer, the most requested feature long discussed before the expansion, and now the only one anyone knows about given the feature-sparse E3 announcements ahead of its release window in give or take 4 months. The way the blog posts were worded very clearly tried to obfuscate this, to the point it was acknowledged by HMX Josh that it was misleading. My own observation, which I've peppered in a bit throughout, is that Harmonix were always consciously tiptoeing around calling online multiplayer an eventual free update since at least the December blog and AMA. My speculation is that the plan to make a paid expansion was planned around that December, and they mulled over pricing in which features were to be made free and others to be made paid alongside online multiplayer. While most of the dedicated players planned to buy the expansion anyway, Rivals was starting to be seen as a source of resentment existing players and many of the series faithful were starting to have with the game as a whole. On July 19th, they pulled back the curtain and announced 2 more primary features, the Drama Story Mode and the Rivals Gameplay Mode. Drama was posited as the first playable rock documentary, an additional story campaign where bands would play shows similar to The Tour, with a linear narrative structure of your band's rise to fame, composed of quirky live-action interviews with actors and Harmonix staff, plus in-engine interstitials with a narrator and voiceover lampooning the style of behind-the-music TV rock docs. The namesake game mode Rivals was both an expansion of their previous asynchronous-based social mechanics already implemented, mixed with some of the Battle of the Bands type challenges from previous entries' tour modes. Players would form their band and compete through the leaderboards on weekly song challenges, though at this point in the timeline the details were limited to just these brief descriptions. The day before, on July 18th, members of the road crew receive an email from HMX Crisis, signaling the end of the road crew program, but thanking them for their support of Harmonix and the franchise. She confirmed every member would also be getting codes for Rivals on the House as a parting gift, an encouragement to keep the party going through the year and into the next. When I asked if this was always the predetermined endpoint of the program, she stated, I don't remember if it was 100% the plan for the road crew to wrap up alongside the release of Rivals, but it felt like a natural stopping point. The game was evolving into its next phase, and so was the studio's projects in development. Personally, while it makes sense for them to have ended it there to reallocate promotion to other projects, they really needed good word of mouth from the fans at this point more than ever. And intentionally or otherwise, this program ending in under a year into the service game's lifespan retroactively became a sign that development on the platform was starting to wind down in terms of features and promotion. A more detailed outline of the Rivals mode comes a few months later in a community blog and trailer in September, including the release date for the expansion on October 18th. It highlights the dedicated hub for the mode, the max roster of 10 players for every Rivals crew, the weekly challenge elements like the spotlighted songs and associated song menu UI changes to identify them, a ranking tier promotion system as the means of player progression and retention, as well as a companion Rock Band Rivals iOS and Android app to check progress and send DMs to crewmates. The community didn't seem to dislike what they were seeing with the Rivals mode, but there aren't really any threads I could find hyping up the Rivals editions either. There was an AMA with Josh and Chris on July 21st that mostly was fielding questions about dipping quality of certain DLC trackmasters and the continued European DLC export troubles, but did address some elements of Rivals. Most notably the lack of crossplay and the removal of the pickup switch on the PDP Jaguar. One of the most insightful questions of the bunch regarding the development was asking if they were always planning to make online multiplayer require the expansion, to which the answer was no. Josh claims they excised it from the main game suite based on game data showing it wasn't a widely used feature, some of which was determined based on lower rankings on, presumably, the initial announcement survey. When the veracity of the pool of data was called into question, he hypes up the analytics person who collated it and tried to emphasize that the utilization metrics recorded across multiple different areas reiterated this information. However, he partially concedes that the data for online play for Rock Band 3 has since likely skewed heavily the other way, following the launch of Fall, with it being the only game in town in a recent enough generation with it. The problem I have with this does not lie with the usage data itself, but that survey takers and the dev leadership that saw and acted on the data were under different assumptions about how it would be used. The questions asking about what you want to see further updates to are as generally vague as what is essential in a new Rock Band experience, without establishing the caveats that come from the results, means that by default, participants were not adequately informed enough to answer them. Collecting this data in a comprehensive way is crucial to make metrics actually useful. Numbers alone aren't enough. Answers fluctuate based on how you ask a question, and for a game that has many facets to its identity, it's hard to pull anything out from that core experience that doesn't piss off players, especially when they're asked to rank their hierarchy without establishing a capping point. And yes, a lot of people don't take surveys and play the game differently than how the vocal fanbase played it. That could also mean a shit ton of casuals who played online with their friends didn't answer that question either, and were as subsequently burnt as the community who answered those questions not believing online multiplayer would be in jeopardy. Using people not queried as a defense leaves you exactly as vulnerable to those same people on the offense, since the argument is inherently imaginary and unhelpful. But moving on. The expansion releases on the promised day months later, and the critical consensus appears to be limited but mostly positive. Many of the major review outlets opt not to review the expansion on its own, nor adjust their previous Rock Band 4 reviews to accommodate feedback on its additions. Mysteriously, this includes IGN, who was pretty much on the pulse of the coverage of this game from the start. The one Game Informer review piece on it was glowing, coming at it mostly divorced from any of the drama unfolding in its community and looking at it solely from its merits as a fun addition to a larger experience. The PDP instruments don't have a lot of remaining discussion from this launch period still available outside of some Reddit threads. Objectively, both Rivals bundles were cheaper than the original Mad Catz bundles at release, which was obviously seen as an improvement. Some players were particularly outspoken on the feel of the Jaguar's strum, whammy, and fret buttons both ways, with everyone's mileage seeming to vary overall. The drums and Jaguar both had similar reported issues that the Mad Catz instruments had, such as with Bluetooth connectivity drops, but were generally seen as on par or slightly better. As big of a deal Harmonix made about how foldable and bendable the neck of the new Jaguar was, it did not seem to make a splash positively or negatively in the community either way. Wakudrama ended up being a bite-sized campaign edition, designed as if it were to be replayed more frequently over 1 or 2 play sessions compared to the longer toll story mode. Progression was tracked via a single fame value, which would accumulate based on stalls earned. Additional fame could be wagered before and during a set if you feel your band has the skills to nail the wager challenge. Hitting a fame threshold allowed players to continue the plot, taking you to new venues and goofier scenarios. Mileage varied for the community on its sense of humor, which I thought was fun enough for a single go-through. I don't personally find it to be as replayable as the toll mode comparatively, not that I would play either more often than normal quick play, but I wouldn't consider it a negative addition to the game. Rivals mode essentially allowed for more dynamic forms of stat tracking and competition for the more skull and full combo focused players. Gameplay-wise, it is a uniquely crafted interface for quick play that highlights themed tracks each week with a larger team effort via crews. The progression is essentially through its tier system, which had your band promoted or demoted weekly based on their collective experience points, which they would get through ranking and scoring high on the spotlight tracks, and separately from playing non-spotlight songs curated for the theme. The tiers go from bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, and lastly, bloodstone. It would get gradually more difficult to maintain your rank the higher your rank was, and to my knowledge the reward was the occasional blog shoutout and mostly bragging rights. It was less a competitive battle of the bands, and more maintaining your dailies with skull chasing involved. To some degree I always perceived there was an incentive to buy all the DLC that became the spotlight tracks, giving an advantage on the spotlight skulls and in turn XP. However, I never pushed for Bloodstone hard enough for that to be a problem personally, and the non-spotlight tracks I had in theme were enough to get me through to a higher ranking every time I gave ranking up a shot. Though, I do have nearly 1,000 songs total. The community didn't seem to make posts with that as a concern as far as I could find either, which I think is a sign that they did a good job with the ranking balance numbers overall. Some subreddit threads had players who couldn't play spotlight tracks delisted from the store complain that other players had an unfair advantage at the highest possible levels of Rivals play, which were mostly met with indifference and derision for being in the niche of taking the game too seriously. To some degree they are right, because they usually wanted something that would make the game worse for everyone else, like removing delisted songs from the equation altogether and limiting the pool of playable songs. Though I do think it's kinda shitty to get mad at someone for pointing out balance issues with a game mode specifically targeted for this type of hyper-niche player. Oh, I didn't bring the... Oh, it's a twist off. There you go. I cannot find a single sales figure for Rivals. This could either mean Harmonix leadership was not as comfortable addressing that topic as they were with the base game, or that they were more focused on their upcoming releases at the time to dedicate press talking about Rock Band 4 anymore. Hey, this is not bad. Shoutouts. In terms of manufacturing, the last adapter, the oft-mentioned Rock Band Wild Legacy adapter for use with supported Wild Rock Band drum kits like the Ion Rockle, is released by PDP on November 25th, 2016. According to Game FAQ user and Rock Band community member Chrism Chasm on release, the page went up and was already out of stock on Amazon when trying to buy it. The implication being they couldn't buy it elsewhere like PDP's own site, and that the company wasn't able to meet demand. The players that did get the dongle gave mostly positive feedback, stating that it functions as it should and finally allows them to play drums the way they've wanted to for months. This sells almost immediately on December 19th, when Reddit user Plausch When Reddit user I Am the Plausch posted a response they received from PDP support regarding availability after it sold out again earlier that week. After less than a month after release, production on the adapter has ceased per Harmonix's limited quantity arrangement with PDP. In Destructoid's article on the subject, Harmonix declined to comment. There was no warning that this would be the case, and no advertising on purchase listings that it would be a very limited one as far as I could find. This does not inspire confidence nor yield praise from some of the most dedicated portions of the community. And to my knowledge, this is the last public presence PDP has of Rock Band Fall gear in terms of press. There were brief sales of these adapters in July and November of 2017. With scalping already taking place on the dongle at that point, and not a single hint of reproduction being on the radar, these were likely file sales with the last remaining stocks they found throughout the year. I am unsure what type of contractual obligation would cause them to not have just sold more after the bad press coming at them after discontinuing the adapter, but I won't hypothesize on that specifically. Taking PDP at their word at the time, and with what information is available, an assumption I will make is that the manufacturing of the Rivals instrument line had ended not long before or after this sale. There was no official confirmation of their partnership being dissolved, only a single PDP customer support rep months later in March of 2018 saying they aren't doing anything for Rock Band anymore. After this, it is radio silence from both them and Harmonix regarding adapters and controllers, leading to the continued drought and overhyped prices the community has been dealing with for years without official product support. Refocusing back to December 7th, 2016, online multiplayer gets delayed to January 25th, 2017 in a blog, citing more time needed in the oven to iron out what Josh describes as edge case scenarios that might lead to obscure bugs and issues. The December update now includes 12 free songs for Rivals users, new workshop items, along with a number of bug fixes, as well as quality of life improvements for the Rivals UI. The community managers start briefly coining themselves as the Rock Band Forever team on their blog, which I think might have been a mix of just being a cute name they came up with, but also accidentally more publicly signposting the end of active feature development and promotion of the title. I will note that even though I will start to skim even more past a lot of these blogs at this point moving forward, it doesn't mean the community managers are doing less on their end to keep players engaged and informed on maintenances, weekly DLC drops, and Rivals content until further down the line. A blog is released on the 22nd to give a timeline to European PlayStation players about when they can expect resolution for the export DLC issues since launch. The resolution timeframe goes as far as May 2017, though it does hit snags to delay that time even further as the months pass. A March 16th, 2017 update adds 11 more free songs for Rivals users and collab workshop items for all players regardless of Rivals ownership. On April 24th, they announced one of the last significant updates to Rivals content-wise, Rivals Seasons. These seasons are a restructuring of the weekly challenges into 8-week seasons, with unique workshop rewards for players based on their Rivals crew rank. They elaborate on this in further blogs, but establishing everything important in this specific post, Josh addresses the correction of a new exploit similar to the previously patched Squeeze. Certain calibration settings and pauses had allowed players to get higher scores than normally possible. The exploits were fixed, with Josh proposing similar leaderboard solutions as before. A Reddit post infers the second of the 3 options was chosen, and there's some drama since it possibly impacted non-exploited scores and could not definitively be proven it fixed every single exploited score. On May 9th they introduced missions, tasks and challenges in their own achievement-like menu that upon completion gives players accomplishment badges that can be shown off in quick play. The update's patch notes for when it comes out in June detail that Seasons phased out demotion entirely, and resets all crews' rankings as a result to give everyone equal footing. The faster you and your crew get to Bloodstone at your own pace, the sooner your crew gets to the exclusive rewards. Along with this comes a rehaul of the companion app to accommodate, an increase of the player level cap to 100 from the previous 50, a quality of life toggle for vocal overdrive activation to be button only, and performance optimizations for stuttering and drag during gameplay. All on top of a number of fixes in underrated quality of life, like new sound effects, menu music, and standardizing the audio levels of exported tracks, which were by default louder, to uniformly match the ones for Rock Band Fall. From here are more of the broad strokes of what's been going on with Harmonix themselves, as this is the last feature-rich update. Most of what happens from here on patch-wise becomes mostly bug maintenance and workshop cosmetic ads. Whatever the sales were from Rivals software and hardware-wise, it seemingly did not allow for work on an additional expansion in the subsequent months and years since launch. Even if it was a success internally, Harmonix ultimately decided the rest of the service life of the Rock Band Fall platform would be keeping it updated via rival support and the DLC track marketplace as a feature-complete experience. In terms of Rock Band Fall related news, the next 4 years are relatively quiet. Harmonix spent this time mostly focusing on separate projects that would go on to be released to modest success, such as the physical card-based music mashup game Drop Mix in 2017, the VR rhythm shooter Audica in 2019, made from the ashes of a cancelled title called Chroma from 2016, and the digital musical festival themed mashup game Fusel in 2020. But I now have to inform you of an unfortunate trend Harmonix had that is frustratingly popular now in the AAA space. Layoffs. This is actually the section this was full. Let's make this a little more fun. I don't even know if I'm allowed to show this on YouTube. Whew. In the 5 years between 2013 through 2017, there were at least 6 rounds of layoffs. While the studio never announced the names or positions of the laid-off parties, some articles and social media posts around the time mainly reference reports of artists, community managers, and game design staff being let go. I never saw mention of management or executive staff layoffs or cutbacks. Gee, how odd. Really boggles the mind why that might be. In both April and December 2013, Polygon and GameDeveloper.com, then Gamma Sutra, respectively reported on a non-specific number of staff being dropped for a vague shift of staff priorities for future projects. The former after successfully landing a venture capital investment, and the latter seemingly midway through Fantasia Music Evolve's production. On May 24th, 2014, the company told Game Developer they were letting go of 37 full-time staff members as part of a restructure, specifically not citing anything that would be deemed financial, but would, quote, bring the organization into alignment with our current and future product development plans. Not personally sure how other people's livelihoods that did work for your games were misaligning your plans, but whatever, at least they shifted management to pretend there was a consequence on this round. On January 11th, 2016, they laid off the remake of Amplitude's design lead, just 1 week after its release, and a senior QA lead from other projects at the same time. No rationale, just some amazing attempted PR wizardry from some dude making the ambitious attempt to change the meaning of the word layoff to try absolving management of the layoff they did. Just own it, gang. Say the company would rather have staff lose their livelihood for a time rather than retain them for another project. Be honest. You look like jack-offs either way, but at least the latter has you taking ownership of a decision rather than the dodgy sniveling, actually thing you tried here. Tied more closely to the story of Rock Band Fall's development, 2017 had 2 rounds of layoffs, 29 total staff being let go between March 30th and October 18th. The first wave of 17 cited as part of another restructure after releasing Rock Band VR, and the latter 14 of non-specific overhead reduction after releasing Drop Mix. The March layoff impacted HMX Crisis, who you hopefully recall managed the front-facing parts of the road crew, on top of being one of the most active blog posters and moderators as a community manager. Speaking on her time with Harmonix, there's no spitefulness or ill will, only speaking to the joy of supporting the Rock Band community. I definitely had a great time working on Rock Band Fall, from its announcement through launch and far beyond into the weekly DLC releases and Rock Band Rivals. Really, my favorite parts were getting to meet the community at events and finding those moments to share a laugh with each other online. I can't thank the Rock Band community enough for inspiring me with every blog post I wrote, every stream I hosted, every tweet I tweeted. It was an honor. I emphasize her work throughout this video not only because she took the time to answer my questions, but because she was one of many key members on the community management team that kept the community overall thriving. Even in the face of a rough number of months of controversy between the Barebones launch, controller and adapter shortages, DLC fulfillment and marketplace troubles, the FIG campaign, and leaderboard wipes, she, along with the rest of the public-facing Harmonix staff, gave this project their all, and kept the community lively, inviting, transparent, and a fun place to be. Chris and many of the other laid-off parties are thankfully in better spots now, most still working in the industry where they continue to do amazing work. To leave this dismal portion of the story off on a higher note. On May 21st, 2019, then Harmonix Director of Marketing and Communications, Dan Walsh, gives a non-committal update to the community in a Reddit post on, what else, but the future of Rock Band. He doesn't go into any specifics outside of promising continued support via weekly DLC, more rival seasons, and their cosmetic rewards. There's no active plans for anything concrete, only assurance that the team is excited and open about the idea of Rock Band 4 getting further updates of some kind on the incoming Xbox Series models and the PlayStation 5, should they be compatible. The feedback is mostly positive since a lot of the bitterness has long been over and back to the generally passionate and supportive vibe for the devs they had maintained for many years. A lot of encouraging comments and requests for updates for Harmonix to take into consideration. This, however, is the last major Reddit update Dan makes regarding Rock Band 4 specifically. He comments every so often, like to address some drama with Lizzo's Juice DLC track leaving an ESRB impactful no-no world accidentally, updates on other games, and even a confirmation the following August that compatibility of Rock Band 4 with next-gen dev kits started ahead of the pandemic quarantine earlier in the year. The next significant point in the game's service lifecycle comes another year after this in 2021, with a surprise that leaves players both anxious and curious about the future of Harmonix and their games as a whole. On November 23rd, 2021, Harmonix puts out a media blast on all their socials and sites announcing they have been purchased by one of the largest developer and publisher organizations in the business, Epic Games. Epic, historically famous for their landmark Unreal franchise and industry-standard game engine of the same name, acquired the studio with the plan to create musical journeys and gameplay for Fortnite. Fortnite being their biggest IP and the most famous free-to-play live service game platform on Earth after aping the Battle Royale gameplay type in 2017 and scoring a number of commercial licenses for their cosmetic skins to massive financial success. Harmonix were fairly open that their plans in the short term were essentially to operate their games as they have been while shifting their primary work to Fortnite. They committed to continuing support for Rock Band 4's DLC and rival seasons, though expressly stated that there were no plans to manufacture new instruments. They also stated that they did not plan to, quote, change the way they support their games, namely Rock Band 4 and Fusel. This is in lieu of outright stating they intend to support both games for any set duration. The only long-term plan is their work on Fortnite, which at this point, and for quite some time after, remained a mystery. Immediate general reactions ranged between optimism at the growth potential and presumed safety of Harmonix operations for the foreseeable future, to this being the beginning of the end, or lamenting the company potentially being hard-locked to Fortnite pipelines and dropping support for their own titles. There was an alleged instance of crossplay between PS4 and Xbox One players the month before in October, which sparked excitement in the community as a possible sign of things to come. However, with no acknowledgement from Harmonix in the months or years following, this instance of functionality might have been intended for internal testing, only to be accidentally rolled out in the live server. Why the manufacturing, or lack thereof, of new instrument controllers was addressed in that announcement, outside of being a critical component of the life of the service game they just committed to continue supporting, was due to the low inventory aftermarket on the limited Mad Catz and PDP instruments and adapters produced in 2016 or prior. As touched on before, with no direct market for new manufactured instruments and no homebrew instruments being developed at an accessible price and scale, the secondhand market for used instruments becomes scarce and overpriced in general. Guitar Hero and Rock Band controllers that are compatible with Rock Band 4, or can become compatible for free community-created PC titles in the rhythm game space, most notably Clone Hero, have prices starting at the low end of $45 to $60 for Wii and PS2 peripherals to astronomical guitar and drum bundles for $300 to $400 for PS4 and Xbox One, with individual instruments regularly selling for over $100, but prices generally fluctuate based on the sales platform at any given time. The legacy instrument adapters for Rock Band 4 specifically are hard to find and seem to go for between $300 and $900. The best way to get reasonably priced equipment is to be lucky thrifting and hope what you bought still works. or to have already bought your Mad Catz or PDP instruments and legacy adapters in 2015 or 2016 respectively at original retail price or on clearance, since there is no real way to play with the mostly Xbox 360 and PS3 era instruments on the consoles without the legacy adapter or the PS3 dongle. As of this reading, there is a new somewhat official manufacturing run of Rock Band full guitars to discuss, which I'll get to in due time. Fuso gets a lot of focus in the form of live streams and video content throughout 2021, with rival season challenges and DLC updates making up the majority of blog posts into 2022. On the 7th anniversary of the game's release, the official Rock Band Twitter, now X I guess, tweets out that the Rivals expansion is now free to download on all platforms. The full game and Rivals becomes a bundle for $40 digital, which is on its face great news for Rock Band 4 owners that have been on the fence for buying Rivals for those 7 years, but is a tough purchase prospect for new Rock Band 4 players given the lack of instrument availability. Perception is that while that's a good gesture, it was far too late to do this now, with an already dwindling player base and lack of manufacturing parties to introduce new players into the game. The comments are mostly hardware and dongle requests and other general complaints, with fanfare interspersed from the remaining community. 2 months later, on the 2nd of December, Harmonix makes an incredibly brief blog post unceremoniously announcing that they are delisting Fuso and ending all online play and DLC support on the 19th. It's jarringly devoid of any of the normal trappings of their blogs, which makes sense given the subject matter, but it seems more off-putting than normal for already sad news for its community. Like this game that was their main focus over the past few years was now being swept under the rug with seemingly nothing to replace it, and they couldn't even designate one of the artists to crank out a farewell JPEG. Just under 2 weeks later, on the 14th, Epic Games announces their plans to disable online services for a number of their own internal back catalog, as well as for a number of additional Harmonix Studio titles on January 24th, 2023. The list of titles includes Rock Bands 1 through 3, Dance Central's 1 through 3, Green Day Rock Band, The Beatles Rock Band Blitz, Drop Mix, Sing Space, and the Rock Band companion app for Rivals, which my headcanon is that this was a pissy Tim Sweeney mandate following their lawsuit with similar piss baby corporation Apple. For the few that might have noticed one entry's omission and might be curious, LEGO Rock Band was absent from this list as it was already delisted and disabled likely sometime in or around November 2015, according to its entry on delistedgames.com. Audica, Rock Band Fall, and Dance Central VR are singled out, confirmed to retain their online server support. Following this is another year of near silence on Harmonix's future directly. The copium from the 2021 crossplay event made it into 2023, with the community grasping for the shortest, thinnest straws of anything that wasn't a rival season spotlight update. Which is a shame because it certainly was cool that seasons were still happening, but with no one being able to jump into the game without dropping a few $100, the labor was being done for a small, declining pool of dedicated players. And with that being the case, along with the culmination of all the previous game servers looming ever closer, I can imagine people were getting antsy. It wouldn't be until December of that year before Epic unveils and releases the sub-platform and emote implementation they've had Harmonix building within Fortnite's infrastructure. Fortnite Festival is a free-to-play Rhythm Highway gameplay mode simultaneously announced and released on December 9th, 2023. This game type was part of Epic's rollout for their Chapter 5 expansions, alongside dedicated LEGO and Rocket League game types. Fortnite Festival has its own curated section of the platform, with gameplay that shares a similar Note Highway gameplay to Rock Band's, but built with console gamepads and keyboards in mind. I will say in advance, to assuage any notion that the rest of this analysis is going to be a fancy, long-form way for me to say, the game sucks ass, I think the song variety and every chart I played during both Season 1 and 2 are all as well done as they can be given the limitations of the gamepad and keyboard for this type of game, and the loop, while unpolished at first, but has steadily improved, is overall solid and can be further cleaned up and given extra juice over time should Epic continue providing support to do so. Though, it's the long-term plans that have me concerned, that I will be emphasizing in this analysis. And yes, Rock Band Fall's full development is intrinsically linked to my concerns. But false, how does Festival play? In lieu of a formal menu system, the game opens to a mostly dormant theater lobby for you and potentially 3 other queued players in this online-only game to choose your options via different button or key inputs. You handle the online lobby, regardless of being in-group or solo, via the Start button or Escape key. You can calibrate your video and audio settings after the initial sign-on by talking to the sole NPC in the lobby. Picking your song or crafting an up to 4-track setlist is done by using an interactive organ computer in the middle of the lobby. Holding the down D-pad or B key allows your avatar to do your assigned emotes and funny Fortnite dances as you would in the Battle Royale mode. The select button opens a map, which on at least one occasion locks you out of gameplay, showing to a degree how much this experience is grafted onto a separate gameplay experience. Gameplay can be described as a hybrid of a Persona dancing title with the foundational UI of Rock Band. There are the full traditional difficulties of easy, medium, hard, and expert, and full playable chart types. Lead, which is either guitar or keytar depending on the track, drums, vocals, and bass. Players time the inputs mapped left to right using the D-pad and upper and side face buttons on a gamepad, all to the remappable default D, F, J, K, L keys for PC to the visual input spots as denoted on the screen at the appropriate times synced to the music. You accumulate the same named overdrive meter by hitting the distinctly colored notes with 100% accuracy in sequence, which can then be activated immediately after accrual instead of after filling the ball halfway like its spiritual predecessor. Activating overdrive doubles your score multiplier for the duration of the accumulated meter. Activation is initiated by pressing the trigger buttons on gamepad or spacebar on keyboard, with the latter option being a bit less conducive, in my opinion, but I got used to it by the end of my play session using the keyboard. The caps for the default multipliers somewhat differ per instrument, with leading drums capping at 4 times max to become 8 times during overdrive, and bass and vocals capping at 6 times max to become 12. The charts are all uniquely synced to the appropriate instrument type, however all play as a general visual facsimile to the guitar and bass charts from Rock Band in terms of how you input them, minus strumming. Guitar and bass tracks are charted similarly to how they would be in Rock Band, but accommodate not having the same dexterousness a guitar peripheral allows for in terms of speed and note complexity. The lack of a neck and strum ball means the charts aren't conducive to the full instrumentation, but an approximation of it based on the tempo. Drums are often charted with more chord-type double notes at the opposite ends of the highway to impart the heft of percussion, and vocal tracks generally consist of single notes going left and right to simulate the octave path. Charting is generally fine, but since the notes are an approximation out of necessity, charts don't quite match up to the songs they're paired with, and I don't mean in terms of calibration. You really feel with the drums, especially on tracks that are also in Rock Band, that these festival charts can't quite match the speed of the sounds being played, which oftentimes screwed with my input tempo. Hammer-ons and pull-offs are present on all instrument types, visualized via stark white arrows. These are designed for players to leave a space with no input during that period to hit the note. When your chart has empty spaces with no notes to hit for a prolonged period of time, it temporarily disappears and brings a timer to count the number of seconds before you resume playing, similar to Rock Band 3 and Fall. A key distinction, however, is you can now emote and funny Fortnite dance while you wait, to sometimes horrific effects at launch. Seemingly this has been fixed on my second, more recent play during Season 2, but it released with this happening fairly regularly. A new addition is the ability to hit perfect notes, which is a vaguely perfectly timed hit on the input spots that gives more points. A frustrating holdover of the general rhythm game genre that Guitar Hero and Rock Band both smartly hadn't adopted. I love getting a flawless weighting and 100% of the notes hit, to be told, actually you didn't hit 100% well enough, here's your number of arbitrary non-misses the game didn't like as much and lower subsequent score. A minor nitpick, but I hate it, and it's bad. Before moving on from playability, one of the key defining benefits Festival has over Rock Band is the removal of any dissonance when using peripherals on instruments that are not being used in a chart. The The creativity this allows can lead to charts with vocodal, theremin, or any other type of accompanying voicing on either lead or vocals, or both, since charts aren't tethered to the actual instrumentation anymore. Charts of any songs with non-drum kit percussion can include all varieties of bongos, synth pad triggles, clicks, snaps, claps, whatever, can be looped in with the primary percussion without the disconnect of hitting those notes on a drum peripheral and losing the natural rhythm. This makes it so that even vocal a cappella tracks can be active on all instruments, in theory. As critical of a component the instruments are to a rock band experience, Festival does not necessitate this and plays differently as a result. This is partially where my concerns about this being the replacement come from, which I'll get to. With the game being online only, it does not allow you to pause. Annoying, albeit understandable, given the nature of the game, but also not my real complaint. Because there is not a formal pause menu and is rather the online lobby UI, attempting to quit in single player simulates the shame of fumbling and bumbling around in the online menu to try and quit out of the song while you drop inputs in game to a muted backing track for like 10 seconds. There's currently no local split screen multiplayer. While this can be implemented at a later time based on Fortnite having local duos in online play, that doesn't inherently mean it will be added. On April 23rd, while underway on voice recordings for this, Fortnite Festival updated with Rock Band full guitar compatibility as part of their Season 3 content drop. They rebranded the Pro monarchial for original style Rock Band charts for guitar and bass, because this video wasn't long enough apparently. But don't worry, after downloading the 30+ gig update for 40 minutes, I sat down for what I thought would be a successful attempt to play the video game, and... While Fortnite obviously recognizes that I was using the Rock Band full Strat guitar and matched the UI to the color buttons, it clearly still has issues with this being used as the main controller. Most notably with no way to calibrate the audio-video settings since you can't move the character to interact with the NPC in the overworld. All the options to start songs and change difficulties and instruments are mapped to the fret buttons in one direction, which is okay, fine. Then after picking a song and getting into gameplay, none of the frets work and it asks me to swap device. Absolutely refuses to register any inputs for the game outside of menuing. Remapping wasn't an option, and trying to reset the strat caused the game to no longer recognize the guitar as a controller at all until I did a full reset. There was also the smaller bug I showed before, where the playlist menu preview bled into the song after navigating it too fast, which might have been a more pressing issue if this had actually distracted me from the gameplay in this case. Other people seem to be having better luck, so I think maybe I am really unlucky here. And obviously all this will be fixed sooner rather than later. I'm sure buying PDP's latest offering would fix this problem, but I'm absolutely not rewarding them for their part in creating the dogshit aftermarket. From what I could see of the charts by watching them, I'm fairly positive the Pro charts are fun and will be enjoyable to play whenever it ends up working for me. The only major change that seemed to work during my Season 3 session as intended was a UI update changing the orange overdrive notes to a better looking, sparkly particle white, more reminiscent of Rock Band. Looks a little nicer, but it doesn't really change any of my bitching moving forward. So now, onto the progression systems. At launch with Season 1, the progression in the game was relegated to completion of daily tasks and general quests to accrue points. These points went towards that season's 2 battle passes, unique to specifically this game type, called Festival Passes. One pass is completely free and consists of 1 or 2 instrument cosmetics, emotes, icons, songs commissioned or made by Epic, and background JPEGs for the loading screens. The Premium Pass allows you to get commercially licensed tracks exclusive to the pass, at least for the duration of the season, and more plentiful character skin and instrument cosmetics. All of which runs players a little under $15 in theory, but requires players to buy at least 2 separate V-Bucks installment purchases of $18 at the minimum. Epic brought Microsoft points back, baby! The passes and their contents are time-locked to the 8-week period of the season. during which players accrue points by completing quests and doing dailies, taking a general estimation of 2 hours for every 1500 points during Season 1. This means that to unlock everything, regardless of paying for the pass, you had to spend between 20 to 24 hours per season playing the game. Which was not like the worst grind in the world if you space that out between the 8-week period, but it could be grating with playing the same, to their credit free, smaller pool of songs if you don't drop $4 each in V-Bucks to buy new songs for permanent use. When playing Season 2, they seemingly addressed the grind a little bit. They rebalanced points to be accrued much faster, with me hitting 1000 points in a 30-minute play period. And they also included additional progression in the form of wristbands, which are unlockables tied to specific quest list completion that give free players cosmetics upon completion of all wristband quest requirements. I don't think this ultimately changes my mind on anything I felt from my first impression, but they did flesh out and improve the experience more from Season 1. Season 3 makes no significant progression balance changes as far as I can tell. Getting back to the music marketplace, there are a rotation of free licensed commercial artist tracks each week for players, on top of free Epic Games and Fortnite tracks for unlocking in the free Festival Pass. Season 2 upped the cap from about 10 to 20 songs in the free rotation. Players do not have to spend money on the music they are playing, outside of the ones exclusive to be unlocked in the Premium Pass, at least as of now. However, without spending money, you are playing generally the same songs for 7 days straight, with minor deviations, again, at least for now, across the full 8-week season. Any purchased songs are able to be used in Festival for unlimited play for all players in your lobbies, regardless of if they all bought it. Which is surprisingly generous if this Reddit post is to be believed, because I could not be asked to find out for myself since I am out of Xbox Live and my dinosaur laptop can barely handle running any model game without threatening to explode. Purchased or unlocked songs can also be used as an emote in the Battle Royale mode, as well as the Jam stage lobby to do fusel and drop mix-like mixes in-game based on your equipped instrument. These Jam emotes allow for you to tweak the tempo and keys, making unique mixes using any of the Jam tracks you have on their respective instruments, which I find no shame in admitting is super cool. A fun gimmick that I didn't try. I'm just not interested in doing it. There doesn't appear to be much appeal for Battle Royale players to head over to play Festival, outside of someone really wanting specific cosmetics and Jam tracks for the Battle Royale mode they can't just buy, which I imagine is a fairly limited type of player. This sums up the current Fortnite Festival experience. While I think I had an alright time for the little over 3.5 hours I played and the $0 spent, it felt unfinished. Since it is intended to be part of the Fortnite ecosystem, the limited scope and gameplay loop being played divorced from the rest of the platform makes the game feel undercooked, which is a problem when I don't personally have any interest in the rest of the suite outside of this game mode. Everything interface-wise was awkward to maneuver, the UI and flourishes for the highway are minimal to the point of being boring even after the polish in Season 3. I was stunned at how janky the game performed and how easy it was for it to break at launch. Even after resolving those issues seemingly by Season 2, the game is absolutely still breaking in new and compliance-shadowing ways that impact even basic gameplay, with a seemingly high susceptibility to do so at every significant update. The gameplay and charts are serviceable, but are slow and sort of bland compared to other genre offerings, let alone Rock Band. I wasn't having a good enough experience to find myself willing to grind quests to complete the free Festival Pass at launch or now. Nor was I willing to drop money for the premium since I didn't want to be obligated to grind the game out just to unlock Gangnam Style or the weekend skin and single worthwhile song. There was no character customization that wasn't just buying the Battle Royale skins, which you have to do if you don't want to be one of the cycling pre-made characters. You only get to change to one of 5 colors of the default instruments you have unlocked, and I really didn't want to find out if you bought some to get the same range of 5. There's no toll mode or rock shop equivalents to get stuff from, with the closest being the wristbands that got added in Season 2, but the progression is almost solely tied to how willing you are to drop cash and designate hours of your week to time-exclusive season passes that don't guarantee you'll get most of what you paid for. Feeling obligated to maximize the value out of your festival passes, free or paid, every few months out of the year to avoid FOMO doesn't personally appeal to me, and feels like a pretty negative feedback loop to get burnt out on pretty easily. It doesn't feel like a separate music game custom tailored to match Fortnite's ecosystem over 2 full years of development. It feels like an adequate minigame bolted to an existing game's hip with very little accommodation for it from Epic. Not going to pretend the scope of Harmonix's work throughout the full Fortnite platform isn't extensive and immense, or that there hasn't been notable improvements made to it over the first few months of its release, or that any perceived shortcomings are a sign of laziness, which they're not, but as a game mode in itself, Festival is not feature complete enough to be on par with Rock Band or become its own separate suite, with very little room for it to grow without alienating either Fortnite's audience or Harmonix's own. What Epic very likely wanted was the addition of the modest Western rhythm game audience to the Fortnite user base, with their platform wanting out of new players to adopt it as possibly the biggest games as a soloist title. It's not dying, but there's little room for it to grow. No matter how much its numbers fluctuate back and forth, there are a finite number of people on Earth, and the game is reaching a ceiling of people on it interested in the Battle Royale genre, or even games in general, left to jump into it. The game had a high number of players overall during launch, at least 2 million, because it was a free side game in the platform they were already playing on. It wasn't because there was a silent majority of rhythm game players dormant playing Battle Royale, praying for the opportunity to see Jonesy pantomime performing Pompeii on a stage. The daily 10 to 20k players the game sees on PC based on my periodic checks throughout March and April at peak days and afternoons to evening hours is certainly a lot. But compare this to the 400 to 500,000 playing Battle Royale at the same time. The player disparity gap is slightly better on the Xbox SKU after launch, but not by much. A general guess is that it is getting less than 10% of the audience the primary game type of the platform is overall across all versions of the game. Even if the cost of licensing music might be lower based entirely on a generous, unconfirmed ass-pull handicap of limited time song drops and the popularity of the platform might somehow make it cheaper to get sync rights, implementing the charts and the jam track mixing options are probably sizable and costly undertakings to add among developer salaries and other upkeep costs. If you're someone who is actively anticipating Festival to expand big enough to be Rock Band 5, I'd like for you to consider the development and maintenance of Rock Band 4 you've spent the duration of a feature film learning about, and recall how much time and money was spent putting into its development. Harmonix had outside funding beyond $15 million on top of their own undefined mid to large AAA internal budget pre-launch, a successful release that made by their estimate $100 million in sales, and a year of allocated budget for post-release updates, which all barely allowed for them to have the game be feature complete 2 years later with the assistance of an additional paid expansion. Epic is not known to be generous to their acquired studios, to say the least. I do not trust them to allocate resources to anything outside of expanding what is already there now, and I do not anticipate them seeing less than 10% of their daily player base using it as a successful metric to the investors in the long run. Epic seemingly had Harmonix shove it out the door in its most minimally playable state, to have 3 big releases at once last December, maximizing their chances for larger player numbers to bolster a strong fourth quarter going into this year. Even into Season 3 with the pro charts that do match Rock Band's gameplay, the overall presentation and majority of the gameplay suite doesn't feel fully ready for launch, and it certainly doesn't feel like Rock Band yet. Both during pre-release and at launch, there were takes confidently proclaiming that Festival was the Rock Band experience, that it does not necessitate the key features that made Rock Band distinct from the others in the same genre. Its full band controller suite, immersive peripheral design and gameplay features to aid in the rock fantasy roleplay all throughout the series, a full avatar customization suite of characters and instruments with progression that wasn't tied to your debit card and how loose you might be with it, unique leaderboards for specific bands rather than just the individual players that introduced a layer of complexity and unique identity with your skull-chasing buddies, the touring-centric campaign with Rock Band 2 onward catering to how your band's story developed based on player-specific choices or any of the other elements I emphasize less, like multiple forms of competitive skull battles, or the buildable library of DLC that would move forward in all subsequent Rock Band entries, all you need is purely the gameplay loop of syncopated notes to music on a descending highway chart, and that was the full breadth of the gameplay experience Rock Band provided apparently. This is not, nor has it ever, been the case. And if you don't believe me, maybe you'll recall studio director and co-founder of Harmonix, Alex Rogopoulos, saying this during Rock Band Fall's press cycle. The two things unequivocally Rock Band in Fall were the suite of instrument peripherals and the local band multiplayer. And near the top of the page on the news release from Epic regarding Festival, instruments not available at launch, but a vague affirmation that it's a priority into 2024, and no local split screen. They knew enough that these two features are the core pillars of what makes Rock Band to tell players in advance so they don't go in expecting those and being disappointed. Regarding instruments, the PDP Riffmaster has been and remains a confounding addition to the news cycle. You remember PDP, the guys who made the Jaguar controls for Rivals for less than a year in 2016 and 17? Those guys that could have manufactured additional instruments using the framework of the Jaguar like they have here, bendable neck and all, to curtail the ludicrous aftermarket prices since 2017 onwards and didn't? This company that only chose to shell a controller out 7 years later for use in Festival? All presumably both from a suit's short-sighted desire to get big Fortnite money, which it will only receive a fraction of? Festival, as we recall, the game in which the default charts weren't built around using peripherals at launch before these were announced, so the guitar wouldn't have been optimal for use in it in case Pro Chart implementation took longer than it ended up being, and would reintroduce the dissonance to drum and vocal charts? Bless Harmonix's merciful heart for justifying PDP's gamble at all by making them compatible with the added Pro Charts at the exact right time, but they really didn't have to. PDP's choices are nothing short of frustrating and bizarre. They saw years of a smaller, dedicated market clamoring for this gear they were very well equipped to provide for the whole time. They saw this and refused to provide to this market that dwindled smaller and smaller as a result until a money-printing live service over half a decade later decided to tether the company and its audience that used their gear onto their platform. I can't in good faith support them as a result, since it was their lack of support that made this peripheral so desirable and its market so ass to begin with. But I can't blame the Rock Band community for pre-ordering the thing in droves. It does work for Rock Band Fall since it's essentially the same peripheral as the Jaguar, and this might be the 1 year they ever sell it given their track record. To cap this section off, let me outline my major concerns with viewing Festival as the next Rock Band outside of gameplay or design. Let's say they get all original Rock Band instruments back and implemented again soon, and do 4 additional Pro Charts for every song that is and ever will be in the game. You think Epic will allocate the funding for them to do all that alongside a brand new manufacturing one? Which would likely require them to create or contract an entirely separate manufacturing party to do? Hell, do you think most Battle Royale players will pay the $200 to $300 plus for the guitar, drums, and USB mic to justify them making unique charts for all 4 Pro instruments? This on top of the default festival charting on keys and gamepads with the additional implementation as jam tracks? That's quite the amount of labor and subsequent financial undertaking for something that, again, only about 10% of the daily general audience of Fortnite even plays on a given day. Do you think Epic wouldn't raise the price of jam tracks to match that undertaking if they thought they could get away with it? Are you willing to spend more than the already $4 for each track and build up your DLC library at over twice the original price of Rock Band tracks? With them implementing PDP Riffmaster functionality on April 23rd, keep in mind they are now relying on a third party to manufacture these instruments for however long Epic or Harmonix plans to support the game. Rock Band 4 guitars specifically are also compatible, at least for people that are not me, I guess, but there's no word of a remanufacturing one. I don't think PDP wants to create competition with themselves by making another Jaguar one, and Mad Catz probably isn't lining up to remake their strats either. So it's all currently on PDP, a third party that can just drop the line again at an instant if it doesn't make a shit zillion dollars over the course of this year. a third party that was already confirmed to be an awful manufacturing and co-publishing partner on their last similar project together. Do we not expect there to be more shipment issues, shortages, and he said she said bullshit if and when adapters and controllers are being sold for surprise limited runs again? The last two runs failed to last a year by both old Mad Cats and the current PDP making the Riffmaster. Do we anticipate Epic allowing for PDP to be the be-all end-all when they inevitably stop manufacturing them? For them to have greenlit and financed a niche play type for a portion of the already smaller subset of players on their platform to play? That a portion of gameplay on one of their live service platforms becomes inaccessible to the majority of new players the moment PDP decides to end manufacturing support, but can't lock away from those players since those charts are purchased as part of jam tracks? This manufacturing support Epic themselves doesn't directly profit from? Will the game continue getting this extra chart support when PDP's manufacturing runs are done, banking on players to keep the aftermarket alive again to keep buying through scalper-like aftermarket prices on an active live service game that doesn't sell them the controllers needed for half of the charts created for every song? On the other side of the same argument, what did the peripherals add to the jam stage? They would manufacture and produce a new line of instruments for something essential for only one portion of one game type in the suite? There's a lot of issues bringing the rest of the Rock Band instruments into Fortnite that are in conflict between the audiences for the full platform, the current festival, and Rock Band. I don't believe Epic has the interest to expand Festival into its own ecosystem like it would need to do in order to become the next Rock Band. They have shown almost no interest in ownership of the Rock Band IP as of now, really just wanting the highway gameplay and the short-term gain of players from its community at launch. They presumably like Festival as it is now, and would only want Festival to grow in more ways to better suit the larger Fortnite audience. And to some degree, I can't necessarily blame them for that. As much as I love Rock Band, I also understand that the IP might be too niche to succeed on its own at the same scale. That transplanting Festival out of Fortnite to make a Rock Band Fusel hybrid without Fortnite's install base would be a significantly riskier move financially than staying the course. And no matter how lacking this project might be compared to Rock Band, I acknowledge that Festival in its current form is likely the best we'll get while it remains the biggest Western developed commercial music game in town. Festival is not Rock Band, and the expectation that it is undersells both the full gameplay experience Rock Band offered and the distinct experience Festival is trying to be to set itself apart to its larger audience. Rock Band Full's development story ends where we started it. Daniel Sussman, now Senior Product Manager at Epic and Project Director at Harmonix, posts on the Harmonix blog titled An Update on Rock Band DLC on January 17th, 2024. They plan to release the final tracks on January 25th, and reminisces briefly on how big of an achievement the colossal DLC catalog truly is before hyping Festival. He also confirms that online multiplayer remains supported, and future rival seasons are incoming. March 20th was the start of the current Season 36, with this week's Spotlight theme and tracks posted on their socials pictured. It's great that Rivals is still going, but I can't anticipate based on them discontinuing DLC tracks mixed with their previous unceremonious sunset of Fusel that this will be the case for more than a year or two. Gaming Press reported about the end of Fall's DLC as if they were penning a eulogy for the game, and there hasn't even been a blog by Harmonix since January for anything. All promotion is done on Epic's sites and socials for Festival, and the majority of devs are clearly hard at work in the Fortnite mines as far as what is publicly visible. With the hindsight of knowing the state of Harmonix when development of Rock Band Full began, Festival seems to echo the perilous position they were in when first breaking away from the backing of Viacom, developing a game where failure could very well mean the end of their studio. The title developed under these circumstances, as their sole platform moving forward, is pushed out in an underbaked form, with players hoping for parity to its previous installments over time, while staying optimistic and making the most out of what's there to support the team they've invested in over the years. But the consequences for failure that Harmonix faced during Fall's development will be exacerbated by being a subcontractor under Epic Games. Epic, who has not hesitated to ruin, or almost ruin, successful studios and businesses after they got what they wanted from them, all for having a modest success as opposed to the mega success Epic expects of them. A company who slashes massive numbers at studios they bought to the point of them being in imminent danger, or even closes studios following acquisition before they had a chance to launch anything, Embracer style. They're continuing to improve the festival suite and are committed to providing support for rival seasons into the indeterminate future. But with how volatile the live service arena is, how secure is Harmonix really to keep doing so in the long run? Epic certainly has the capital to pass around and bankroll pretty much anything Harmonix would want to do, but that doesn't mean they will. I might be laying too into Epic in terms of the freedom they seem to give to work on cool shit. However, I do think I am right to be weary for how long they'll do so if player numbers don't become astronomical sooner rather than later. What percentage of Harmonix staff members will be cut during Epic's next round of layoffs? Not that Harmonix management historically has needed help with layoffs, mind you. Will Harmonix be able to keep the lights on if Festival ends in the next year or two, if Epic just decides to throw more or all of their funding into something else instead? Would the company survive a sale to another publisher even? Rock Band 4 at the indie scale of the mid to late 2010s appears to have been a success based on the public reporting and rep statements Harmonix put out. But I'm not so sure Fortnite Festival has been a success at the scale of modern AAA live service games today. Where not making every dollar possible in the gas business model means you close up shop after a year or two, and all the work your team did gets thrown away or shelved in a vault to go unused forever. The remaining team at Harmonix has a number of unsung heroes still working on the technical and design ends, but I don't know that supporting Fortnite Festival is going to support the longevity of the company in the long run. Not that I'm saying don't if you want to, just that I'm not counting on that saving them if the support isn't enough for Epic. I don't have any armchair recommendations on what Harmonix needs to do in order to solve that, but the state of the games industry overall isn't inspiring a lot of confidence that they have a long life ahead of them outside of the value of the company's branding as the premier Western music game studio. My appreciation for Rock Band 4 and the years of work that was done on it by its staff led me to chronicle the development as best as I can before it goes away forever. To try to make it clear that Rock Band is not as simplistic as a note highway. That the environment in which Western rhythm games have been in for years isn't solely because it was a fad that no one was trying to adopt, but that failures during critical moments during the development cycle of specifically this game and its ill-advised rival Guitar Hero Live absolutely tanked the genre's greater adoption and success. That despite the shortcomings and frustrations the community had, that a dedicated and terrific team of designers, programmers, QA, and community managers at Harmonix did the best they could to keep the community and its passion for the franchise alive. No disrespect to Festival, I don't want it to go away and would love to see it improve further than it already has, but I just don't see it becoming the next Rock Band. I don't see it having a near decade-long life cycle with its stakes being so high in the live service space, and I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel where this as Harmonix's sole project for the foreseeable future and is dependent on a fickle organization known to squander amazing services and talent allows them to succeed beyond Fortnite. I'm concerned not as a hater who wants to see Festival fail, but as someone watching an industry continuously on fire, seeing a studio that put out some of my favorite games stand in line to get put on the pile. Support everything to keep the lights on overall if you want, but be more vocal for the possibility of a true new Rock Band experience. Banking solely on Festival only risks locking Harmonix into a corner that will be hard for them to get out of if their new owners ever deem that project's finished and have no indication of having demand for more. When I first started writing out this script and editing it around the end of last January, I was incredibly worried about how long making all of this would take me. Not just in terms of actual hours to make it, which I can confidently say now was entirely too many, but mainly because of how stupid I'd feel if the game changed significantly after I finished writing the initial script in March of 2024. And sitting here now, over a year after Festival was released, and approaching a year after Rock Band 4's DLC sunsetting when I started this, I'm somewhat at an impasse with the excitement I have for the bigger additions that have been made, despite retaining doubts and cynicism that somewhat muddy these objectively good adds to the game. May 23rd adds Pro Lead and Bass rebinding options for keyboard and mouse on both console and PC, so players are able to play these charts without the guitar peripherals. A positive, proactive measure against being completely shit out of luck when external manufacturing ends. The controls being described seem kinda wonky on paper, but I'd still consider this an objective win, given the alternative being where Rock Band has been. As seen a fair bit throughout the last 2 chapters, the battle stage is added in Festival Season 4 on June 13th, 2024. It's a retrofitting and expansion of Rock Band 4's brutal mode into a last man standing competitive game type. Up to 16 players compete for the highest scores on a folk track set list, where overdrive activation is now a single attack, creating a visual boundary partially obscuring the note highway and having the score multiplier cap for other players. A few of the lowest scoring players are dropped each song until there's a sole winner. I've seen complaints about its matchmaking, as it apparently mixes players of all difficulties in an odd way, its weird way it handles its attacks, and no meaningful rewards for playing and winning overall compared to just playing the main stage. It can definitely use rebalancing work and more interesting attack options, since it lacks the depth of even Guitar Hero 3's competitive mode from 17 years ago. But it seems serviceable as the only game in town with a rhythm comp mode like it. On the more cynical side, however, event consoles like the KLG experience you're seeing here happen occasionally, though you might notice how there was no festival gameplay. Their most recent live console event for Fortnite Chapter 2 Remix wasn't held within Festival either, but the main game. They have a whole dedicated space for virtual consoles to be held in the platform, and they chose not to utilize it somewhat regularly. This year's The Game Awards highlighted a teaser for CRKD, a spiritual successor to Red Octane, the guys who manufacture the tech for the Guitar Hero series. Their site reveals themselves as essentially the biggest competition for PDP's Riffmaster. They're planning to make peripherals for Festival, Rock Band Fall, and fan community titles Yarg and Clone Heroes specifically. They even made a weird handheld peripheral for Festival in the same vein as the Guitar Hero DS titles. I think this is great to see as well. To see another manufacturer getting confident in making controllers for these games again is a good sign to see in terms of the health and growth of the community. Especially as they were preventing a near monopoly by the one who seemingly willingly let the aftermarket get as awful as it has been, for a number of years. I probably will not be getting an influencer Riffmaster. The festival YouTube channel releases a 1-year anniversary rap style video that focused on metrics instead of outlining plans. Like, what was the most spammed emote? Their big anniversary season events consisted of having, I believe, all jam tracks be available to play for free briefly, which again, rad. But they're also reselling you the stuff from the previous festival passes, but in platinum this time. They've already made a Battle Pass Greatest Hits collection, recycling cosmetics with a gaudy solid color. Most recently, and most importantly, they've re-added local multiplayer with Season 7, with a trailer harkening back to Rock Band's style of house party marketing and a similar slogan to "Start a band, rock the world." I am happy to concede that Festival has finally added the 2 pillar features of Rock Band to meet the minimum criteria of being a Rock Band entry. But with that, after 3 or 4 years of active development as Harmonix's current flagship title, as far as we know at least, Festival is nearing basic, not complete, but basic feature parity with Rock Band Fall. The irony being, Festival's online multiplayer was prioritized over the core Rock Band experience at launch this time, and in return, the Rock Band community clamored for the return of the missing instruments and series feature set. A direct inverse of Harmonix's strategy and their audience's responses to the launch of Rock Band Fall, which was treated more harshly as an underbaked experience. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Harmonix can never truly win with their audience, can they? Season 7 also added Hatsune Miku into the mix, so disregard the entire video. Festival is now objectively the best Western music game in the market. No notes. Despite my love for it, and beyond the year of no DLC support, Rock Band 4 is not in an amazing state as it stands. Pairing my Xbox Live to my Epic account was a bit of a pain in the ass, and hasn't really been worth it with the fairly dwindling number of players online. Connectivity with my drums, guitars, and adapters to my Xbox Series X have made recent play sessions with my friends awkward and lengthy to set up. Even if CLKD and PDP produce instruments for the long haul with continued compatibility, the game is still on its last limb of developer support, without a match-for-match replacement. On top of this, and obviously I could be wrong, but the more unique elements of the Rock Band series that I really loved, like online created bands, a full in-depth character creator, and the toll modes, are likely not coming along for the ride to Festival. The only hope is that a suitable replacement adds enough from the Rock Band series suite to be a good enough facsimile of the original experience I adore. Whether that be from Harmonix themselves, or the dedicated fans making community-made experiences emulating their work. Festival is absolutely in a much better and functional shape than when I had initially left it, but it's still missing the right elements and feel of its predecessor. It doesn't really have the same flavor and charm as going through the toll. You aren't really rocking the world with your friends, at least not from within the game itself. When represented on the band leaderboard, you're just four dudes who happen to play together. When you walk your Fortnite character around a nearly barren, dilapidated theater environment, with seemingly no means to change this as far as I know, it feels like a pointless and stale waste of time to explore. It's missing the flourish and fun of the curated toll or even Rocky drama experiences, where there is clear progression and identity for every player. There's room to argue an open environment like this can be used to create customizable hubs for your bands in the future. Maybe even a sense of progression with your hubs reflecting progress in an eventual toll-like career. But right now, it's still a symptom of Fortnite's engine requiring a pre-game lobby. Festival is not yet the game I love, but it might be getting closer than I ever anticipated it would. I think they're on the right track, and I don't doubt that they'll get some more of what Rock Band fans want in there. Pro Drums was already a given based on the data leak I showed before. A practice mode seems doable, since I can't imagine it being too technical to re-implement, in a similar way to the other Rock Band full features they've already added back. I would hope a pause button for at least local play will come too, but it's not guaranteed. As much as I wish for scrolling vocals were tone, it might need to be rebalanced too much compared to the festival tones to be feasible. But hell, I'll err on both being possible eventually just to be an optimist. But there's still the consistent, lingering feel I've had this whole time that prevents me from building myself up too much to get invested in this platform. The feel that Epic can just pull the plug on all of this in an instant to shift resource focus back to the primary Fortnite game types, like they've done with Paragon, Rumbleverse, and the rebooted Unreal Tournament. Festival numbers are higher, but not much more different than they had been back in my early 2024 check-ins. While it's not the worst performing and most dead of the three experiences they released in 2023, that crown going to Rocket Racing, significantly more players are playing LEGO Fortnite, and magnitudes more than that are playing Battle Royale. We have to hope that Festival is just successful enough for Epic to continue to bankroll it so we can keep it active. And even with that leaves Harmonix again as a Fortnite mill. It might have been what was needed to keep the studio going. I'm not blind to that. That doesn't mean I have to like this fate for them. Festival would not be exempt from shutting down just because there's momentum and the community is happy with it, nor seemingly would the studio's legacy and recognition within the industry protect them if Epic wanted to rebuild the platform for the company to be financially sound again. I go back to what I said months before, but slightly adjusted. Festival is still in Rock Band 4's shoes. It's the team's flagship platform that's a decent start, but with many notable features missing at its launch, to which they start adding back over time, banking on goodwill and promises of what it might grow into tomorrow. But this time, instead of risking everything with everything to lose, Harmonix seemingly already lost everything, and they have slotted themselves snugly into the corner that they were being driven into. They aren't the team making games for non-musicians to experience the joy of making music anymore. They are the Fortnite musical experiences team. They're another subsidiary studio under the Epic Games umbrella, with all the risk that entails. What is tomorrow for them? What is tomorrow for Rock Band? For Festival, even? Does Epic see the same tomorrow as the remaining Harmonix team does? Will we see tomorrow as Harmonix envisions it, or as Epic does? I don't know. But at least for Rock Band, the answer probably lies in what we already saw yesterday.